Yes.
The Leaf Spring Army sends its regards.
Hello, everyone. I'm the Enforcer, and I'm accompanied by Enforcer Matt.
And good evening, folks. It's Enforcer Matt, and welcome back to day 1251 of the War News stream. And today we have very big news that Lithuania has deployed troops to the Belarusian border amidst a drone incursion. Also, Russia has been shaken by massive drone attacks, and Cambodia has breached a ceasefire with Thailand merely 24 hours after it was reached. And it's good to see you all once again.
And of course, we're going to be covering the past 48 hours of news from around the world, as we've been able to hear significant developments that the Lithuanian armed forces are now being deployed to the Belarusian border, and possibly with future deployment orders to the border of the Kaliningrad Oblast of the Russian Federation after a Russian kamikaze drone, a Shahed 136 or a Garan 2, flew directly across the entirety of the capital of Lithuania, Vilnius, just yesterday. This is also following today after stern remarks was made by the President of the United States that the Russian Federation's deadline to reach a peace in Ukraine will now be significantly shortened, with an advisor to the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev, also known as a former president and prime minister of the Russian Federation, making drunken threats on the internet, threatening the life and health of the President of the United States, Senator Lindsey Graham, and many others inside the U.S. government, while also stating that such demands to bring an end to the war will result in a full-blown confrontation and war with the United States of America and the greater whole of the NATO alliance, with Dmitry Peskov, everyone in the Russian government apparently is named Dmitry, the spokesperson of the Kremlin, also making statements that the Russian Federation has no intent or interest in ending the war at this moment and will continue to pursue their war goals inside the state of Ukraine without an end in sight. The President of the United States has made it incredibly clear that he is disappointed by these statements and actions of the Russian Federation and the lack of an official statement or clarification by the President of the Russian Federation, Vladimir Putin. This is following directly alongside the developments inside of Southeast Asia, as we were able to confirm that the ceasefire hastily reached by the United States in between Thailand and Cambodia collapsed completely within 3 hours, with firefights now breaking breaking out not only in Uban Ratchathani, which was the first contact, I guess you could say, of enemy forces within the region, but we have now also been able to hear of firefights breaking out in the Sisaket and Surin regions as well, with the advisors of the Cambodian and the Thai military no longer pledged to meet, and that meeting has been postponed indefinitely, showing that that war is now back in full form. Meanwhile, we've also been able to hear inside the Middle East that the Islamic Republic of Iran appears to now be pursuing nuclearization once more, or at least the rapid progress of nuclearization that they were achieving before Operation Midnight Hammer and the 12-Day War, as excavation activities have now been spotted around the Fordow uranium enrichment plant, showing that they are trying to get access to the inside of the facility. We have also been able to hear that between Lebanon and Syria today, Hezbollah forces ended up killing 2 officials of the Syrian interim government, which may lead to further confrontation between the 2 warring parties. We've also been able to hear that the Yemeni Houthis fired another one-off ballistic missile at the State of Israel, which was promptly shot down. The State of Israel is also considering the possible annexation of large parts of the Gaza Strip, which has been met with international condemnation by some and international support by others. We have also been able to hear of a massive 8.9 earthquake near to the area of the Kamchatka Peninsula, which is currently at this moment actually hitting the coastline of Japan as we speak right now. We have also been able to hear of other major developments inside the Ukraine war, as the state of Ukraine is continuing to attack major Russian mainline railroads within the Rostov Oblast, striking specifically today at the main rail yard at Salsk, apparently causing significant damage to the railway station and possibly other equipment and materials used by the Russian state railroads within that area. Ukrainian armed forces have also to continue to defend their lines among most areas today, and we've also noted a significant spike in radiation near to the area of the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, although an exact reason for this radiation leak has not been stated yet publicly. We have a massive amount of news today, and we still have a load of news that we have to cover that isn't even in our top headline pieces that I was able to tell you all about in our summary right there. Suffice it to say,
and also, by the way, real quick, everybody asking about the major earthquake. There is a historic earthquake that just took place near Russia. It's causing a lot of damage on the coastline of that Russian area where the earthquake occurred. And right now, there's major alerts going off in many different countries as a result of that historic earthquake. It's like an 8.8 or an 8.7. So that's like one of the largest earthquakes we've had in about 100 years or so around the world. So quite a large one.
It's incredibly large. I also want to make it a little bit clear really quickly before we go into the stream. I see a lot of people asking, is that some sort of a nuclear test? From what we generally understand, there are practically no nuclear tests that can actually produce a seismogram of that size, around an 8.8. So this appears to be entirely seismic activity along the Pacific rim of the Pacific tectonic plate, which is fairly normal. There are a lot of earthquakes to happen on the Pacific rim, but one of this size is actually historic and pretty much unseen for the past century. So it has been quite significant. It's caused a massive amount of damage along the Kamchatka Peninsula, some small parts of the island of Sakhalin, and we're also hearing that some of the remnants of that tsunami, which was caused by the earthquake, are currently reaching the Japanese coastlines of Hokkaido and reaching as far south as Fukushima, at least at the moment. We are waiting for any additional news or information on that at the moment, but I also want you all to know that at least for tonight, while we will be covering a little bit of that news, it is not the forefront or focal point of our news tonight. It's still largely going to be the major developments that are happening in foreign policy and global conflicts happening around the world. But we will be giving some intermittent updates on what's happening with that situation throughout the course of the stream. But moving on into our major pieces of news for the night, we have been able to hear that tensions between NATO and the Russian Federation are continuing to slowly rise, as we were able to hear today that Lithuanian armed forces are now being deployed to the Belarusian border, and we were also hearing rumors that they'll be potentially be deployed as well to the Kaliningrad Oblast border after a Russian drone flew out of Belarus yesterday and directly over the Lithuanian capital of Vilnius. This information is quite significant, as it is showing us that at least at the moment, one of the Baltic states, the state of Lithuania, is having to heighten its border security against the Belarusians and the Russian Federation due to the actions that could be considered dangerous or violent yesterday by the Russian Federation. From what we were able to know 48 hours ago, and if you want to know more information about this, please make sure to go to the short war video that we published yesterday. A Russian kamikaze drone, either of a Garan 2 or Shahed 136 variety, flew over the Belarusian border yesterday over the capital of Vilnius in Lithuania, which is about roughly directly from the border, about 20 miles across the border, flew directly across the capital, and then flew deeper deeper into Lithuania before it was stopped. This has been a major development, at least in terms of foreign policy, as not only is this a clear violation of Lithuania's sovereignty and airspace, but this drone appears to have also been a general warning by the Russian Federation against the Baltic states, and another attempt to create some sort of a armed escalation of a sort between the Russian Federation and NATO. As a result of this, we've already been able to see that NATO forces in the form of Lithuania have been deployed directly along the Belarusian border at this moment in additional force. We have also been able to hear of the existent threat that Kaliningrad is posing is also weighing on the minds of the Lithuanian authorities, and there may be potential future deployments of Lithuanian forces directly along the border with Kaliningrad as well, which technically is a part of the Russian Federation. This is all following directly on the heels, or more so, what I'm about to be talking about is following directly on the heels of this action today, as we were able to hear that the President of the United States, just yesterday, also stated that the 50-day deadline is going to be significantly decreased to 10 days, as he is now stating that it does not appear that the Russian Federation is taking any honest or earnest efforts to reach a ceasefire inside the Ukraine war, and as a matter of fact, are seeming to take the time that has been given in the 50-day deadline to ramp up their war efforts and to attempt to achieve as much as they possibly can, while Ukraine war support has still been stymied in the meantime, waiting to see what the Russian final answer will be to this attempted forcing of a peace. The Russian Federation has not responded well to this, and we've already been able to see that Dmitry Medvedev has made some incredibly insane threats, not only against the United States, but against the president and against many others that we've been able to see, at least recently. Really quickly to read y'all off the first threat that was issued by Dmitry Medvedev, and I also want to make it a little bit clear that Dmitry Medvedev isn't just anybody in the Russian Federation. He is a fairly significant speaking head, or a talking head, of the Russian government in an unofficial form. At this very moment, he is the advisor to the president of the Russian Federation, meaning that as far as his statements go, he is within the official employ of the president of the Russian Federation, meaning that he is an official spokesperson in a sense, and anything that he says largely can be taken as an official statement by the Russian Federation, unless if there's some sort of a reprimand by the Russian government against him, or if he was removed from this position for making these claims, or that the Russian government came out and officially retracted these claims on his behalf. The fact that the Russian government does not take any of these actions is showing that Dmitry Medvedev has a pretty much free reign to say whatever he wants, and whatever he is saying, the Russian Federation's government is largely agreeing or aligning with, to the point that they find no issue to not bring forward an official retraction of some sort. This was the first tweet of several that Dmitry Medvedev made the other day, speaking about the general situation with the United States of America and the deadline that we have given them to try and reach a peace in Ukraine. The President of the United States playing the ultimatum game with Russia, 50 days or 10. He should remember two things. One, Russia isn't Israel or even Iran. Two, each new ultimatum is a threat and step towards war, not between Russia and Ukraine, but with his own country. Don't go down the Sleepy Joe road. We then heard that a senator of the United States, Lindsey Graham, then responded to Dmitry Medvedev's tweet and stated, "To those in Russia who believe that the President of the United States is not serious about ending the bloodbath between Russia and Ukraine, you and your customers will soon be sadly mistaken. You will also see that the former president is no longer the president. Get to the peace table." The spokesperson, pretty much at this point, of the Russian Federation, the drunken rambler Dmitry Medvedev, then stated, "It's not for you or the president to dictate when to get to the peace table. Negotiations will end when all of our objectives of our military operation have been achieved. Work on America first, Gramps." Then throwing a direct...
Honestly, completely unhinged, too. Also, that does echo what Putin stated as well. Putin said they were not going to back out of Ukraine until they achieved their entire war objective, and that was taking the entirety of Ukraine. That's what Putin wants to do. So that part right there is actually not too unhinged from Medvedev. That's coming straight from the top.
It's pretty much coming directly from the top, and these statements were not standalones by Medvedev. We were able to hear pretty much a direct parallel of these statements in more diplomatic form today from the Rat, which we have pictured here. The Rat stated, or just to make sure that we get this out there, this is Dmitry Peskov, not Dmitry Medvedev. This is a totally different Dmitry. They're all named Dmitry at this point in Russia beyond Putin, and his name's Vladimir. So, you know, it's pretty much stereotype central as far as the names go. They're either Dmitries or Vladimirs currently in the Russian government. The only one that isn't is Horseface, which is Sergei Lavrov. But beyond that, Dmitry Peskov stated today In more diplomatic wordage, the exact same statements of Dmitry Medvedev. Moscow has acknowledged the president's statements about shortening the time frame for a settlement in Ukraine and his lack of interest in contacts. Despite the president of the United States' statements, Russia will continue the war to protect its interest, meaning this will go on until they win, but remain interested in a peaceful resolution of the conflict. This, in short, means they are looking to win, and unless if the United States wants to reach them at the negotiating table and let them win earlier than they would otherwise, they are not willing to even speak to the United States about an actual attempted peace talk. This is once again showing us that the Russian Federation has no real attempt to seek a peace in goodwill, or that they're even pursuing peace as an amenable, amicable, or compromising sort of a situation between the two parties. They are only viewing a peace talk as a tool or implement to achieve their victory early, and they will not accept anything less on the behalf of the United States or the state of Ukraine in those attempted peace talks. This is also something that I have to say is quite inflammatory, as I know that many people have been desensitized to Twitter pretty much allowing people to yap quite freely, but these sorts of statements, here first, are quite offensive to the United States for multiple reasons. One, this is insulting to the President of the United States of America. And I do know that many people have some very opinionated statements about the President of the United States, whether they like them or not, or whether they like the President or not, but I do want to make this quite clear to many, at least as far as the United States is concerned. The President of the United States is the officially elected representative of the United States as large on the world stage. While there can be representatives from the Congress, either from the House or the Senate, that travel abroad to represent America's interest in earnest, the President of the United States is the face of the nation when elected for the 4 years that he is in charge. The insulting statements that they made against our prior president were, of course, insulting. The statements being made against the current president are also, of course, insulting and completely non-diplomatic. This is something that I would largely consider to be hostile. And largely speaking, outside of that, this is showing a complete lack of diplomatic decorum by any representative of the Russian government that is speaking in an official capacity about the future of U.S.-American relations. For this reason, this is not just some drunken guy making a rant. This is an official spokesperson of the Russian Federation that is insulting the entirety of the United States by directing his comments towards the President of the United States, our elected representative, and not only that, he is stating that his attempts to try and bring a peace, while an honorable goal, still impossible inside of Ukraine, are something that will not only result in a non-issue, where they will not be able to create a peace, but will actually result in a greater war between the United States and the Russian Federation, or NATO as a whole. This is an absolutely ridiculous sort of a take by the advisor to the president of the Russian Federation, Dmitry Medvedev, or whatever he is, Drunkendorf, or drunked off, we'll call him that. It's an absolutely ridiculous sort of a statement being made by him, and it's also showing that the Russian Federation is once again treating the United States of America and our attempts to end the conflict in Ukraine as an absolute joke. I would generally say that this is something that is a serious situation. One of the more serious situations that we've seen so far, as it appears that the Russian Federation is not willing to listen to any sort of reason or any sort of even ultimatums issued by the United States about reaching a peace, and that they will take this to the absolute brink. But before we continue on with our news coverage of the developing situation diplomatically in Eastern Europe, I do want to make sure that we break some larger news that's happening at the moment to all of y'all. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so to take a quick break from our mainstream news for just a second about the Russia escalations with NATO, because of course that's massive news. People are asking a lot for news about the tsunami that's currently taking place right now. I do have some estimated arrival times right now for when this is actually going to affect certain areas of the world. Right now we're hearing that the expected arrival time for Kodiak, Alaska is 12:20 a.m. Eastern time. The expected arrival for Southeast Alaska is 12:45 to 1:55 a.m. Eastern, and then the expected arrival for Hawaii is 1:15 Eastern in the morning. So that's currently the arrival times that we're seeing. And also, Enforcer, show the people this footage real quick. We're seeing footage coming out of Russia right now showing the water receding dramatically from the coastline where the tsunami started originally near Russia. And we also have some footage as well of Japan. Japan, it looks like the waters are receding dramatically, and also ships are fleeing from ports in Japan. So let's take a quick break to take a look at this footage.
And here is one of the clips showing the water receding on the Kamchatka Peninsula.
That is far, far back right there. I mean, look at that. There's a boat right there literally beached on the sand.
It's absolutely insane. Honestly, what it looks like, it almost looks like low tide in a shallow area. But what's crazy about this is that this is probably a deeper area. What you're looking at out there might have been, or supposed to have been, about 20 feet above sea level, but the water has receded so far, it's pretty much not even there. In fact, it isn't even there. We also are able to see that the water was, well, actually, we were able to see some marine traffic trackers showing Japanese vessels, fishing vessels, from some of the harbors attempting to break out into the open, deeper sea, so that way they can avoid their ships being wrecked inside the harbors. And we also were able to see some additional footage as well, showing the waters receding around the coast of Japan. Unfortunately, we don't know what area of Japan this is. This is most likely somewhere in between Hokkaido and Fukushima, or somewhere up on the northern island of Sendai, which is the larger main island of Japan. And we can also see here, once again, video being taken from the Kuril Islands and the Kamchatka Peninsula, showing some of the tsunami waves hitting the coastline.
I think they've said so far that I think some of the warnings are 3-meter tsunami waves coming in. So I'm not sure about the conversion to meters, but 3 meters seems pretty tall.
3 meters is roughly about 9 to 10 feet tall waves.
That's pretty serious.
Pretty steep waves. That's the end of the clip right there. We also got to see this clip as well, showing us the tsunami hitting Severokurilsk in this clip right here. And we can see the 9 to 10 foot tall wave sweeping inland, largely like a large bulldozer, wiping away smaller structures or lighter equipment, and pretty much sweeping it deeper inland.
Also, by the way, for all the people asking, this is one of the largest tsunamis that the world's experienced in about 100 years. This would fall in probably the top 10 category of major earthquakes. So this is not just another earthquake. This is a very, very large earthquake, and it's going to affect so many different countries. I think there's even a tsunami watch, or at least some type of alert for the American coast as well, I think with California. And yeah, there it is right there. It looks like there is a yellow alert for, I believe that's most of California, actually.
And it does appear that the state of Hawaii, as well as the Aleutian Islands, are under a direct tsunami warning currently. The northern, or more so eastern part of the Aleutian Island chain is under a tsunami advisory, while the greater parts of the coast of Alaska, from Anchorage to Juneau, Vancouver Island, as well as the larger part of the U.S. West Coast, is under a tsunami watch. We have been able to hear, at least at the moment, and Matthew, please make sure to check on this really quickly, that it appears that a lot of the tsunami watches along the U.S. West Coast have actually been canceled at the moment due to the tsunami apparently dissipating before it can reach the coast, at least according to current projections. But I do believe that the areas of the Alaskan coastline and parts of British Columbia are still under a somewhat significant tsunami watch, at least at the moment. But we'll be waiting to see if we can...
So based on what I'm seeing right here, it appears to be, according to the most recent reporting, that it looks like there still will be some effect on the U.S. coast with a tsunami, but it's unclear right now exactly how bad the effect is going to be. But we're still seeing arrival times. It looks like, according to our latest sources here, and once again, take this with a grain of salt. I'm trying to do this research on the fly. Washington, Oregon is expected to arrive between 2:35 and 2:55 a.m. Eastern time, and in Northern California about 2:50 a.m. Eastern time. And for example, the San Francisco Bay will be 3:40 a.m. Eastern. So it looks like they're still expecting some level of activity on the coast, but it's unclear what.
Interesting. And it does appear, actually, that while the watch was canceled, it actually has now been upgraded to an advisory, which is a step higher than a tsunami watch. So it actually appears that the area is actually under a larger risk at this point, according to projections, from a tsunami than we were expecting, at least initially. So it does appear that this is a larger tsunami. This is actually one of the largest ones that we've seen, and we can pretty much see that the entire coastline of Japan has been under a tsunami warning, quite literally from the most northern tips of Hokkaido all the way down almost to the area of Osaka and Kyoto, which is quite a significant sort of a tsunami warning for the the islands of Japan to have. But we can see that most of the areas further south, near to Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and the surrounding areas, generally are under a tsunami advisory, more so than a warning. So we'll have.
Also, Enforcer, go take a look at this. We currently got some footage right now coming out, apparently showing the sirens sounding across Hawaii due to the issuance of a tsunami warning. Just show just a little like 2 second or 3 second clip of this. Don't show the whole thing, but just to give you an idea of how the sirens are going off.
And you hear them fairly faintly. It's a light little whine in the background, but it does appear that there are tsunami warning sirens going off currently inside of Hawaii. It's a little bit crazy to see how bright in the daylight it is over there at the moment, considering that it's pitch black here where we're at in the United States. But still, quite an impressive sort of an occurrence and event that's going on right now because of this historic tsunami. Nevertheless, while that historic tsunami has been going on, we have been listening to a lot of y'all about the development of the Russian kamikaze drone that flew directly over Vilnius, Lithuania just yesterday, which resulted into the deployment of Lithuanian troops, largely under the NATO banner, towards the area of the Belarusian border and a potential deployment towards the Russian border at the Kaliningrad Oblast. And Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right, so it's certainly crazy times these days. We have Russian drones violating NATO airspace for the second time in a month near Vilnius, which is literally the capital of Lithuania. We got a historic earthquake happening today with a massive tsunami coming along with it. So crazy times. But what are your thoughts about the Russian drone violating Lithuanian airspace yesterday that we did see on camera? So 70% said it was another probing attack, while 13% said it seems weird, but we need some more info, and 11% said it was off course and probably just malfunctioned, and it probably was an innocent mishap. But in my opinion, I'm with the 70%. It seems like another probing attack. The first time, it was somewhat excusable, even though it was still a very bad incident. It was, of course, violating NATO airspace. That's a big deal. But the second time, though, that's not a coincidence. That seems to be on purpose. So this time, with it going so close to the capital, I have a very strong feeling that Russia was trying to see what the reaction from Lithuania would be as a way to probe and see what type of air defenses they have and what type of detection systems are around the capital. So it seems really, really suspicious. I'm with the 70%. But Enforcer, what say you?
I'd have to say that I believe it is another probing attack to test the response times of the NATO alliance and the state of Lithuania, as this is not the first penetration of Lithuanian airspace that we have seen by a Russian drone. This is the second one within a month, and this is also following the penetration of the airspace in Latvia, where a drone flew as far west as Reznike, and then landed within one of the surrounding farms on the western side of the city. This is showing us that the Russian Federation is launching these drones with deliberate purpose to try and test the aerial response times of air defense forces and the air forces of the Baltic state nations, and also their allies as well, possibly, as they're largely eyeballing or preparing for some sort of a larger conflict across the whole of Europe due to their ineptitude or largely lack of an ability to be able to try and stop the war in Ukraine or reach an amicable conclusion at the negotiating table, meaning that they might be trying to test and probe to see how well their air attacks would work within an opening confrontation with NATO within the first few hours. So with that in mind, I largely have to agree with the 70%, and this is a fairly concerning sort of a development, at least in foreign policy at the moment, seeing that they are continually threatening the airspace and sovereignty of the Baltic states, pretty much on a weekly basis at this point. But moving on into the rest of the news that we have within this area and getting back on track about the ongoing foreign policy developments with the Russian Federation, we have also been able to see that while the Russian Federation is still acting pretty strong, at least through Dmitry Medvedev and Peskov, directly threatening the United States with war today because of their complete inaction on trying to stop a war that they illegally started, we were able to see that new information has been gathered on rough estimates on where the Russian Federation is getting a lot of explosive materials or munitions from around the world. And this chart is a pretty shocking one. Many of y'all will know that armed support to the Russian Federation began in small form by the North Koreans within the latter part of 2022. Since then, we've been able to see that their munitions shipments in thousands of tons has reached, within 2024 alone, 250,000 tons of munitions from the Democratic People's Republic of Korea alone. The remainder of the munitions that are being provided to the Russian Federation, at least in a rough guesstimate that's been made by analysts throughout the world, seems to be about maybe 15,000 tons of munitions coming through the Caspian Sea, highly likely from the Islamic Republic of Iran, meaning that at this point, the major arms suppliers of the Russian Federation in official form is the Islamic Republic of Iran, making up very little of the percentage of the material munition support that they are getting at this point, and the largest supporter of the conflict, pretty much the only supporter of the conflict in material munitions form, is the Democratic People's Republic of Korea, aka North Korea. This is starting to make it somewhat clear that the Russian Federation is actually counting on the army of the starving to keep their war going. If it was not for the North Koreans supplying such a voluminous amount of ammunition to the Russian Federation in hundreds of thousands of tons annually, they probably would not be able to keep the war going that much longer. Due to the fact that the Russian Federation is pretty much able to give the North Koreans something to snack on in exchange to continue to get more weaponry, it's made the war a little bit easier for the Russian Federation to financially handle, at least from the warfighting and logistical perspective, and for that reason, the war can keep going on just a little bit longer. This is, of course, something that will be coming around to possibly bite the Russians in the rear a little bit later, as considering that they are largely relying on foreign exports of munitions from North Korea to keep their war going, this is starting to beg the question, what does their war industry even look like in the Russian Federation, or is it also starting to collapse as well, as the Russian Federation is becoming more and more reliant on North Korea to supply them with vital munitions needed in the war effort currently? This is something that we really won't get a good answer to until the end of the war, when a lot more statistics and data come out, possibly after the Russian government collapses, if it does. But it does appear that the North Koreans are pretty much the main provider of munitions and weaponry to the Russian Federation, at least from what we can tell so far. And this ironically means, if you want to look at it in this way, that the Ukraine war is a proxy war between the United States of America and North Korea at this point, at least in terms of the amount of supplies and materials that are being supplied to both sides. A little bit weird if you look at it that way, but still, you could actually try and make that argument, and it might stick a little bit. Nevertheless, moving on from that major diplomatic news, and on into a question that we have to all of y'all about the president's tightening of the deadline that the Russian Federation must find a peace with the Ukrainian state on, now moving it from 50 days to 10, what are a lot of y'all thinking about this? Do y'all think it's the right move? Do y'all think that the president is being firm enough with the Russians to show them that the United States is not messing around? Or do y'all think that this is a very brash and dangerous action, and that the president of the United States may actually be plunging the world into World War III, which was generally the claim made over the past few years whenever any presidents or any authorities in the United States tried to put a handle or put a lid on the Russians' aggression. But Matthew, what are people thinking about this, and what are you thinking about it as well?
All right. So out of the blue, the U.S. president decided to reduce the Russian deadline to end the war in Ukraine from 50 days, which many people criticize pretty widespread, actually. He's now reduced it down to 10 days. So barely over a week, Russia has to either cave to the demands of the United States or face some type of punishment, including secondary sanctions and perhaps even more severe punishments than that. So is this the way to go? Is this effective? 46% said yes, this is the right move, while 31% said no, it's still too generous for Putin, while 14% said anything is good at this point. We can take basically what we get. And I'll say this, a lot of people are still saying the 10-day deadline is still copping out. I personally believe it's the right move. It gives the Russians one last chance to come to their senses, and if they don't, then we should slam them with every sanction we have in the arsenal, and we should also start moving more military toward Russia. We should ramp it up as close as we can get without triggering a war, basically, because if Putin is not even going to talk, right now the U.S. president is saying that Putin won't even return his calls or reach back out to him. Putin has totally gone silent, and to me, that is basically the closest thing you can do to basically declaring war on the West. Putin's cut off basically all communication, and at this point, we have to make a very strong symbolic statement to let Putin know that whatever you're planning in silence, we're not going to let you just get away with it and simply steamroll through Europe. We're going to be there to meet you head on. So we have to do that. It seems extreme, but at this point, this situation calls for extreme measures, in my opinion. So I'm with the 48%. But Enforcer, what say you?
How did it used to go, Matthew? I think there was something that came out a while ago. It was like back in 2015. You used to call me on my cell phone, but beyond that,
He ain't calling anymore.
it doesn't appear that he's calling anymore. As a matter of fact, it appears that the president of the United States is now going straight to voicemail, as we are now getting threatened by some drunken idiot in the Russian government, and also the rat came out and said that they're going to continue the war. So I think it's fairly clear at this point that the shortening of the deadline from 50 days to 10 has actually pissed the Russians off greatly, because now they don't get to flounder around and play games for the next 36 days. By the way, y'all, there was 36 days left in the 50-day deadline, and now it's been shortened where there's no longer 36 days, there's only 10 days left. So that means that in general, the Russians have about 24 days or so to come up with a ceasefire. They've squandered about 14 of that, and there's only 10 days left at this point, at least according to the official statements. As far as I'm concerned, I would have to go with the 47% that said that this is the right move, because it's better than nothing, for one, and this is certainly a step in the right direction. People can be overly critical of presidents of the United States. I'm not foreign to that. A lot of people are usually unduly critical of all presidents, large, whatever their actions may be. I would generally have to say that this action today is actually a pretty decent action. Lowering the amount of days from 36 remaining days to 10 is a lot better than keeping it at 36. And while some people might want to argue that it's a little lenient, this 10-day period is probably going to be giving time, considering that we now know clearly, at least from today, that the Russian Federation is not looking for any sort of a peace and goodwill with the state of Ukraine, for the United States Department of Defense to start to prepare actions and support for the state of Ukraine to start rolling in full form once this 10-day deadline passed. This does give us a little bit of response time on our end to start preparing to send all of our support and military equipment and financial support to the state of Ukraine to help them to keep the conflict going, and also to beat the Russians a little bit extra. So I would generally say that that's probably going to be one thing that we're waiting for on 10 days. The next thing we're probably going to be waiting for on 10 days is for somebody in one of the offices near to the Capitol building, the Cannon House, or the other buildings that house the senators and the representatives, to start writing up a bill that includes all of the significant sanctions that we were looking to impose on the Russian Federation's petroleum and gas exports. Those sanctions should be so extreme and crippling that we'll start to see that the Russian Federation's economy practically implodes within months or maybe less than a couple of years. And that should also be something that would either start to get the Russians to the negotiating table or make them act a lot more extreme. We're just not really sure at the moment. But I would generally have to say that, of course, this channel doesn't base itself on a political front, so we're not always going to say that just because the president is whoever the hell they are, that every decision they make is bad or good. This is actually a generally good decision, and it's going in the right direction. So I'd have to say it's pretty decent. I saw someone say 10 days is a little less than 2 weeks, and that's somewhat true, but I think that this is a step in the right direction, and considering that it's a publicly stated deadline with a countdown, there's really no way to avoid this one and then act like it wasn't made and then to give another 10 days or another 2 weeks without looking foolish. So I have a feeling that this one's most likely going to be followed through on because it's not as ambiguous as, about 2 weeks or so. It's 10 days or so or less. So with that...
Oh, yeah. I think that's one thing. I think people are saying those times, I know people, they've gotten used to this way that U.S. foreign policy is being conducted in a modern era with this new president. People believe that this is going to be an empty threat toward the Russians and they're going to back off of it. I think this time, and we predicted a pretty good amount of things correct at this point. We predicted the Thai-Cambodia situation breaking apart 24 hours after the ceasefire was agreed to. And what happened? It broke apart exactly 24 hours later. So we've gotten pretty decent at predicting things. We're not always correct, but we have a pretty decent track record. I think this one right here is going to stick. The U.S. is really not left with any options except for to basically punish Putin at this point, because Putin's not giving the president any runway whatsoever to chicken out. He has to go in on this situation, or the U.S. president looks extremely weak, and I don't think that can be afforded in the United States politically nor diplomatically can it be afforded. So I don't think this is an empty threat. I think this is a real deal. I see people still saying it's an empty threat. I think this one will be real. I think the secondary sanctions are coming, and once those hit Russia and their economy feels that aftershock, it's going to be a time that Russia's going to either decide to attack NATO, in my personal opinion, or they're going to either have an internal reckoning where maybe there's some type of uprising inside of Russia to some small extent or maybe a larger extent, because they're going to be basically at a situation where their economy is either going to crumble or they're going to pull it together, one or the other.
And also, really quickly, I do have to say this because some people kind of get the impression a little bit that we try and lean politically one way or the other. I have to say this really quickly. As far as this channel is concerned, we do not care who is in politics. It could be the current president, the former president. It could be the president who was not elected a presidential candidate who wasn't elected in 2024 or 2020 or whenever. We really do not care. We don't really make that sort of this sort of a discernment in our analysis on the channel. The analysis is truly neutral, and if an action is good, it's good, and if an action is bad, it's bad. It doesn't really matter whether it was Trump or Biden or whoever who's making the decision. We just analyze it on the face of the decision itself, regardless of who's making it. And while we can say, and we're going to get to it tonight, that the Thailand-Cambodia ceasefire was an absolute mistake and practically achieved nothing, which we'll be getting to here later tonight, this action of lowering the amount of days left from 36 days to 10 is a good action. It is a step in the right direction. And as far as our analysis goes, we have to be neutral and impartial in our analysis. And as far as foreign policy is concerned, and as far as what we view to be in America's interest, lowering the deadline into 10 days, at least on its face value of just stating it is now 10 days, not 36, it's an incredibly good move. And it's starting to show that the United States is going to be openly aggressive against our adversaries in pursuit of America's interests and the interests of the greater Western world at large. So generally, I've got to say that our position in Eastern Europe is starting to become a lot more fruitful and a lot more satisfactory, at least in my opinion, on terms of foreign policy. And that's what it is. I mean, that's the truth of it. And I know that a lot of people always want to have some sort of politically coded thing where the president's actions are always terrible, if you lean one way or the other, or they're always great, but the analysis is always neutral, folks. That's the big thing about the channel. We don't get into politics. This is a good action, regardless of who the president is or who they're not. It's a good action, and we've got to assess it for what it is. But moving on from that and on out of that largely foreign policy analysis, it is time for us to move on into some larger developments that we have also been able to hear about over the course of the day. And that's going to be briefly moving us away from the state of Ukraine and largely Eastern Europe and on down into Southeast Asia into another flashpoint, which has once again started to rapidly ramp up after the past 48 hours has occurred. To bring y'all through a little bit of the details and updates that we have, at least in Southeast Asia at the moment, we were able to hear that there were some fairly significant developments in this region. I had to really quickly stop right there, folks, because I just realized that we actually have one last question for all of y'all, at least on the situation in Eastern Europe, and a statement that Romania said today, pretty much stating that it's an undeclared war with Russia, and largely the peace is already over as it is. And a lot of people have been putting in their 2 cents on what they're thinking about that at the moment. And so, Matthew, what are you thinking about it, and what is everyone else thinking about it as well?
All right, so just to recap this real quick, the leadership in Romania is now saying that it's in an undeclared war with Russia, and now that peace is over in Europe. And what do you think about that? And Romania is not the only country saying that, by the way. We've heard Germany say that for a long time, and we've also heard other countries in Europe say that as well. So Romania is now repeating that about being in an undeclared war with Russia as well. So what do you think? 41% said the war will soon go hot, while 31% said it will probably remain this way in an undeclared war, hybrid warfare type of fighting, while 18% said it seems exaggerated. And on this one, I would say that since we are coming to a bit of a head with this whole situation between Russia and Ukraine, with Russia probably going to make some rash decisions here very soon once the secondary sanctions probably hit their economy, I have a feeling that the odds of this war going hot are rising dramatically. And what happens over the next 10 days is about to really decide if this turns into a large-scale regional conflict or maybe even larger than that, in my personal opinion. I think we're reaching a crux here in this entire timeline with this conflict, that something's either going to break or something's going to retreat. And we're going to find out what that is in about 10 days. Not to sound like someone familiar, but Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I do believe that the war might go hot here soon. I'd actually have to agree with the 42% on that. And this is a little bit of a contentious poll, but the issue is, folks, is that unlike the prior years where the war in Ukraine largely remained contained, the U.S. really doesn't have a choice in the actions it's making right now. And as a result of that, we have a pretty clear track at this point of what the Russians are going to be moving towards because of the actions that the United States has to make at this moment. We kind of forced ourselves into a little bit of a corner, and I'll explain a little bit what I mean by this. With how the prior administration dealt with it, which I would generally consider to be inept. The prior administration generally dealt with the issue by supporting the state of Ukraine, but not really pushing towards any sort of a peace or really trying to pressure the Russians to make a peace. We threw down some sanctions on them. We then supported the Ukrainians with a trickle of weaponry, but it wasn't anything that would actually get something going. Now the current president of the United States has come in and said that peace will arrive or else. And we have started to issue ultimatums to the Russian Federation, and we're also threatening to supply the state of Ukraine with so much weaponry and such a large variety of it, of different types and capabilities, that they actually could face down the Russians on the battlefield and possibly tactically defeat them. For that reason, this is starting to force Russia's hand, because if the Russian Federation sits by and lets the United States apply these significant sanctions to them, which we must, and I think that that is generally a smart move regardless of the consequence, the Russian Federation is now going to have a true ticking time bomb on top of their head that isn't years down the road, it's only months down the road. And then the Russian Federation is going to have to make its responses as rapid and violent as its inevitable demise, which is now being fast forwarded probably within the next year, if the President of the United States follows through on what he's doing. We're just going to generally assume that he will. So for that reason, the Russian Federation may actually be moving towards getting ready for a conventional conflict with NATO, which generally will be inside the Baltics and in Finland. I want to make it a little bit clear that at least as Romania is concerned, Romania is more so in a distant region of the war. If a war actually happens, it's going to be somewhere where Russia is territorially connected. They're not going to be going for anywhere like Romania, which is still a long ways away from any active Russian front line right now, and the Russian Federation really can't launch a successful naval invasion due to the damage in the Black Sea Fleet. But really quickly, we actually have more breaking news coming out at this moment about the tsunami. And Matthew, what do we got?
Okay, so we're getting an update right now about the tsunami, which is affecting Russia heavily. Russia is being ripped apart by the tsunami. There's some severe damage right now where this thing hit. As you can see right here, this is some of the damage from it. And there's also some more pictures, Enforcer. Look at that. This is like a hellscape right here. This is horrific looking. And this is just some of the pictures. There's some more right there. You can see everything has been ravaged. And this is apparently near the Kamchatka Peninsula in Russia's far east. And this is from the tsunami, which was caused by that magnitude 8.8 earthquake, and this is just the initial photos. It's expected to be the damage is probably much more severe than what we're even seeing right there. So crazy to see. Also, Enforcer, I believe this happened very, very close to a Russian naval port over there in that area. I think it was at least maybe 40 miles away from a naval port in Russia or something. I don't know exactly where it is, but somewhere around here, there was a pretty important naval port. I'm not sure if it was affected.
Let me go pull up Russian naval stations really quickly. I think it's more so of a coastal patrol port or something along those lines, because the major port for the Pacific Fleet would be out of Vladivostok. So this is a good ways away from there. But really quickly, let me see if I can find a base, a Russian naval base that would be around Kamchatka. So let's see here. Let's see, Russian naval station. Kamchatka. Let me go pull that up really quickly. So they actually do have a base here, and it's in, let's see, established in the 1960s. It's currently a tourist destination and a ghost town. Let's see, but they did start to refit it recently. I remember that. Let's see, it's intended. So it doesn't look like it's an active Russian naval base, at least from what they're saying, but it's the town of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. So we might be able to find that, actually. It might be on this island. Let's see, Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. Where would that be?
So,
oh, here we go.
So,
here
unfortunately, it looks like I've reposted it right here. It looks like it's Russia's Navy strategic submarine base, Rybachki. That's apparently what it is, and apparently that submarine base was just 80 miles to the east of where that magnitude 8.8 earthquake took place, based on what we're seeing right here. So that's the site I was talking about. It's an SSBN subpin.
Let's see here. It's going to be somewhere around here. And let's see, is this it? Oh, this is it, actually. This is it right here. You know, we actually covered this a while ago, Matthew, on the channel. It's Vilkovo, which is right outside of Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky. I don't remember why we covered this, but I remember trying to find this before, and I just saw it right here. But this is actually a Russian submarine pin. I was actually mistaken. This is still active, apparently, and we can see it right here. And so, let's see, where was this? So, actually, I think that was very close to the epicenter, because if you look at where the epicenter was located on maps, and let me see if I can show this to y'all really quickly. That's the epicenter of it right there where that broken home symbol is. Apparently a home wrecker was there. But outside of that, that's literally right outside of the submarine pin. Not too far away, actually.
Yeah, so with it being just 80 miles to the east of where the epicenter was, I would imagine that it's probably been affected. Now, what the Russians might have done, though, is I guess, I'm not really sure how this works. Somebody who's a submariner would have to let us know if this is how it works. Maybe they could take the thing out quick and submerge it, and maybe they'd be okay. But it seems like if they were right there in the port at surface level where the tsunami was coming in, that could either force the submarine onto land or damage it in some way or another.
Considering that it's in a protected bay and it looks like the mountains or the hills are pretty tall around this area, the tsunami could sweep in towards the Avacha River kind of delta area right here. But I don't really think that the submarine pin is going to be damaged all too much because the tsunami would have to somehow find its way and wrap around Vilkovo to be able to beach any of these submarines or cause any major damage. And I'm very much doubting that the tsunami could actually travel over these hills and into the area of Vilkovo where their submarines are at and cause any sort of major beaching incidents. So I'm not really sure. I might be mistaken and there might be heavy damage at Vilkovo or might be soon. But I don't know if this place will get wiped out per se. Possibly though.
Maybe not. It's possible not. I mean, I'm not really like a tsunami expert, but it seems like maybe the tsunami could come into this protected bay and maybe cause some ripples to go over that way toward the sub pen, like maybe off the back or off the side of one of the other, like I guess you could say shorelines of this area. I'm not really sure how that works, to be honest with you, but it seems like there's a possibility that they could be damaged, but it's really unclear exactly what the damage would even look like since it's so well protected by that little peninsula that comes out right there.
Yeah, it's got if a tsunami came in, it would come in like the only force that would come in would be coming in sideways. It would then hit this hillside right here. So that would take on a decent bit of the brunt of the damage. And then anything left would continue on generally in a straight line or get deflected slightly by the backwash of the tsunami hitting the small peninsula here and might end up directing itself right at Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky or towards the delta of this river. If it does, this is a low-lying area, and generally a lot of the force will end up being dispersed over that low-lying area, and the waters will start to calm down. But I do not think that Vilkovo itself could come under any sort of a significant amount of damage because of the hillsides that are directly in front of it. Let me see if we can actually get a terrain map. Yeah, see right here on this terrain map. How these hills are somewhat larger. And while there is a smaller valley here in between, it's not going to be enough to direct a large amount of the force directly into Vilkovo and allow for the area to get swamped. So I think it might not be under
It
that
might
significant of a risk.
It might be a tough sell on that one. Honestly, for the West interest, best case scenario is the tsunami comes in and it damages those subs severely. That would be the best case scenario, but we're not even really sure exactly how many of their submarines were actually here in the port. I would presume at least one was there because it would be kind of odd to have a completely empty submarine pen right there in that strategic area. So there's probably at least one there, but it's hard to know how many are there. And also, even if there is one there, the odds of it getting damaged, considering all the geographical features like in that bay, it could be kind of low. So that's kind of unfortunate from a Western standpoint, but it looks like Russia might have skated on that one.
It looks like they may have. It doesn't look like these piers, though, actually are able to float. It looks like they're stationary and fixed in place. So the submarines could possibly end up getting damaged lightly by a surge. I see some people talking about a surge, and surge is a likelihood. So it could be damaged in a surge where the water level just calmly rises in this area. And that could end up causing some damage because they are tied directly to this fixed mooring. So that could end up causing some issues, but nothing that would be incredibly severe, like, for example, a sub just getting flung like a rag doll onto the coastline and then having his hull breached. That would be a little less likely, at least at the moment. And also from what we know, at least in former submarine crashes or submarine disasters like the Kursk disaster, most of the damage that was actually caused to the Kursk, it didn't come from its rapid plummet to the sea floor. It actually came from the explosion of the hydrogen peroxide propellant of the torpedo, and that's generally what ripped apart the bow. So even still, submarines are somewhat durable. They have to be because they're a very large and very well-made pressure vessel. Even the Russians, generally understand that philosophy because these subs can go to about 1,000 feet in depth, and the pressures there are incredibly immense. I mean, it's more immense than peer pressure at school when they tell you to smoke cigarettes. But beyond that,
True, true. Also, real quick, Enforcer, we got some. Also, also, by the way, Kamchatka is obviously the epicenter right now of the damage being inflicted on the Russian peninsula. So let's take a look. I've got a new video here I've reposted. It shows some Russians that apparently got stuck in their vehicle. They crawled onto the roof of their car, and they're literally right in the middle of tsunami coming into Kamchatka. So let's take a look. This is crazy footage, by the way. I just looked at some of it. It's wild. So let's take a look.
And it appears that the audio is muted, but the water is rushing in around their car, and it appears that they're pretty much just stuck in place. They're not wanting to get out because they're afraid of being swept away, and it also appears that the dachshund understands what's going on, and the car is now starting to fill with water.
They're about to get on the roof right there. They crawl through the sunroof, and they get up there with the dog, too. So they're fine on top of the car, by the way, if anyone's wondering that.
That is one powerful tsunami. But also notice how low-lying it is. This isn't like a tsunami of the movies, folks, where it's like 500 feet tall and it wipes out skyscrapers. Tsunamis in real life are very powerful, but they don't ever get that tall. So you can see this one here moving on in, but it's not sweeping the car away either, at least in the video. And if they published it, they are alive, by the way. That's generally understood. If anyone ever publishes a video, they're living. Very rarely does it ever get published and then someone dies afterwards. So that appears to be generally the best footage that we have at the moment coming out of the tsunami, but still pretty wild stuff coming out of Kamchatka. But nonetheless, it is time for us to make sure that we keep moving on with our major diplomatic news that is coming from around the world and foreign policy and global news that's happening. And we will be moving on from the tsunami story for probably a while and then resurface it here in a little bit, no pun intended. But moving on from that and on down into Southeast Asia, we have been able to hear that the Thailand-Cambodia conflict is back on once again. To really quickly guide you all through a little bit of what we've been able to see, or pretty much the whole conflict in a nutshell, Thailand and Cambodia absolutely hate each other's guts because of a conflict, or largely a conflict is the best way to describe it, that they've been having over a temple near to the area of the Sisaket region of Thailand called the Preah Vihar Temple. The Cambodians and the Thai both claim that this temple is theirs, and small border conflicts were fought about this from 2008 to 2011. In 2011, an international court deemed that the temple was Cambodia's, but since then, the Thai have continued to legally challenge that in international courts to try and get ownership of the temple, meaning that the diplomatic relations between Cambodia and Thailand have been greatly strained due to this continued lawfare. As a result of this, the Cambodians planted a landmine on the other side of the border about a week ago, or a little bit more than that, on the footpath of a Thai army patrol. A Thai army soldier stepped on the landmine, he got killed, and several other soldiers were wounded. The Royal Kingdom of Thailand, or the Kingdom of Thailand, stated that this was an official violation of their national sovereignty, and that there would have to be a response to this violation of sovereignty, and also the death of their service member. And we're unsure what happened next, but about 2 days after that statement was made, firefights started to break out pretty much along the entirety of the border, and it then turned into a massive armed conflict, with it being the deadliest seen since the 80s when a multinational coalition in Southeast Asia brought an end to Pol Pot's regime. As a result of this, the President of the United States came in and demanded that a ceasefire be reached, lest there be further consequences for both parties, which we were able to hear of in this statement. Let's see here. Right here, and I'll make sure to read this to you all in sequence. The President of the United States stated that they needed to end the war or they were going to face trading consequences. We can also get the direct statement right here, and y'all should be able to get this direct statement as well on your maps if you would like to. Link in the description below. The Thai and Cambodians did agree to go to a ceasefire, which was going to be mediated by the Malaysians with the U.S. consular staff on standby in Kuala Lumpur, and as of yesterday, they officially reached a ceasefire. The ceasefire then was stated or largely celebrated by the President of the United States with a statement as follows. Just spoke to the acting Prime Minister of Thailand and Prime Minister of Cambodia. I'm pleased to announce that after the involvement of President himself, both countries have reached a ceasefire and peace. Congratulations to all. By ending this war, we have saved thousands of lives. I have instructed my trade team to restart negotiations on trade. I have now ended many wars in just 6 months. I am proud to be the President of Peace. This peace was broken 3 hours later, with the Cambodians opening fire on a Thai army outpost on the border of Ubon Ratchathani, just miles away from the Laotian border, which we were able to hear of from the Thai government. We then were able to hear later that this actually turned into a full-blown Cambodian offensive, as they were actually aiming to take the heights near to the area of Chongbuk, directly along the border, right about here. And it appears that they may have been slightly successful in that for a short while. The Thai government then stated that the ceasefire had been broken, and that they would be returning fire against the Cambodian forces for their pretty much violation of the ceasefire. The Thai army reports that fighting had erupted again in the area of Chonbuk, despite the midnight ceasefire. According to the army, Cambodian forces violated the agreement by launching an artillery barrage on Thai troops positioned on a hill. Gunfire is now resumed from both sides. We then were able to hear not long after that meetings were being postponed indefinitely between the Thai armed forces and the Cambodians, as following several ceasefire violations throughout the night and into this morning by Cambodia, today's meetings between delegations of the Cambodian and Thai armed forces had been postponed indefinitely, with the Royal Thai Army currently responding to several cross-border attacks by the Royal Cambodian Army. We then were able to hear later on that a significant amount of offensive actions were now being undertaken by Cambodia over an 80-kilometer long front within the Suron, Sisaket, and Ubon Ratchathani regions of the Kingdom of Thailand, and it appears that at this moment, Cambodian forces are now on the full-blown offensive. The Thai government the Thai army is attempting to stop these offensives and turn the tide, but it does appear that the ceasefire has completely collapsed at this moment, and it doesn't really appear that there was any bringing of peace. We were also able to see some Thai rangers engaging the Cambodians recently in footage that was published from today after the ceasefire collapsed. This is the only footage that we have at the moment of the active ground fighting that is now resumed, but it is confirming to us that both sides are once again engaged in firefights along an 80-kilometer long front, and the ceasefire did completely collapse. Also, if you're wondering why they're standing and kind of just a little chill with us, the Cambodians are hundreds and hundreds of yards away, and for what we generally understand, this isn't even suppressive fire, this is more so harassing fire, just so that way the zip and the crack of the rounds landing around the Cambodians will scare them hundreds of yards down the hill, and they'll pretty much keep their heads down for a little bit. We can now see in this clip there are actual firefights going on that the Thai Rangers are engaging in.
The heck are they sitting under? A huge rock?
It's some sort of a ledge of some kind. I couldn't really tell what it was, but it's like a giant rock-faced ledge of some sort.
That's wild. It's like it's on top of like dirt. That's kind of crazy. It's like a ledge over nothing. You'd expect this to be like a cave or something, but it's kind of hard to tell.
You know, it's almost like a natural rock bunker.
Yeah, it's really weird. Really convenient, too.
Yeah, it's really bizarre. We now see them getting back under the ledge as another soldier comes out to take his place and start firing from the opening. And that's the end of that clip, but still showing us, at least in that little snippet, that firefights have resumed. It appears that the ceasefire completely failed pretty much within hours, which I do have to say, not that we're proud of it, but we were correct in assuming that the ceasefire was going to immediately fail. We stated this on Sunday on our last stream, and I believe that Matthew also restated this on Monday, that cheap ceasefires do not achieve anything. If anything, cheap ceasefires only achieve a momentary victory that may last for quite literally no time at all, and then the war begins again. The ceasefire did not address the underlying issues that both warring parties had, and it also did not address Thailand's ability, or largely right as a sovereign state, to be able to respond to the Cambodians in an act of self-defense. None of that was addressed, and it appears that the ceasefire was largely forced under the duress that there would be trade sanctions and punishment applied to both countries if they did not attempt to reach a ceasefire. So, under duress, they agreed to the ceasefire, and once again, because the underlying issues were not resolved, it appears that the Cambodians went right back onto the offensive, and the war has begun again, with really nothing being achieved in the meantime. I see a lot of people have actually been talking about this ceasefire, or largely the attempt at a ceasefire that was made. And Matthew, what are people thinking about it, and what are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so obviously the ceasefire was broken within 24 hours after it was agreed to by both Thailand and Cambodia, and the main party pushing for that ceasefire was the United States, and that follows a long line of this same strategy of going for very cheap ceasefires and pushing them through at the expense of basically everything else involved. So, what are your thoughts? 37% said it was a waste of time and pointless, while another equal 37% said at least a ceasefire was attempted, and 21% said the U.S. should stay out completely and let the region sort itself out. So on this one, I'm not saying this to brag because I don't want to come across like I'm bragging. That's not the point. The point is, we did call this. We said that this exact situation was going to happen, and sure enough, exactly the way we described it is exactly the way it happened. I'm not really like proud of that, to be honest, because I was hoping, like in the back of my head, that maybe it would work for once, but it's too predictable. We knew how this was going to go, and unfortunately, we can't just overlook reality. This is the way it really works in real life. Cheap ceasefires don't work. So I'm with the 36%. I think it was a waste of time. We'd have been much better just staying out of this region, letting Thailand and Cambodia handle it themselves, or at least just putting in like a very basic diplomatic statement that we hope they come to an agreement with each other. But instead, we jumped headfirst into it. We started peer pressuring both sides to come to the negotiating table against their will, and now we're back at the same square one, square zero, basically. So this was not productive. It was pointless, and it honestly matches up with all the other ceasefire failures that we've seen so far. And there's a lot of bragging going on from the U.S. when there's really no bragging to be had right now. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I would be with the 36%. It was pretty much a waste of time and was largely pointless. People like the concept of peace, and I would agree, peace is great, and peace is a wonderful thing. But the problem is that when you speak about the mechanical side of things, there are things in foreign policy that just don't work. And I know that a lot of people would like to live in fantasy, because everyone does, generally, especially when people are very political. And people would like to think that whatever their president does, it's great. Like, for example, the prior president not really doing anything in the Middle East was a great idea. It's not. The current president trying to force a ceasefire literally everywhere, and every single one of them largely failing within the last 6 months, to others might be a great idea. But the issue is, folks, is that there is no such thing, just to make this clear, as a bad policy. But there is such a thing as a bad implementation of a policy. And this has been a bad implementation of a policy of trying to instill peace around the world. Peace is a very difficult thing to achieve, and it's incredibly difficult to keep. And going around the world and threatening people under the equal duress, ally and enemy alike, that they will suffer great consequences if they do not achieve a peace, forget all of the underlying issues, forget the reason the war even started, you'll have to reach a peace, lest there's going to be even greater consequences. It doesn't achieve anything. There are multiple ways that this could have been gone about that actually would have achieved something, like, for example, the United States threatening direct military intervention if the ceasefire was violated. Would anyone want to do that? No. And if you're not willing to threaten that and largely put that extreme duress onto both sides, this ceasefire wouldn't work. If you also equally are not going to go in and actually find the reason why they're fighting each other and then try and fix that underlying issue, it's going to restart again. There are multiple different ways, as the old saying goes, to skin a cat, but the problem is that the way that we tried to skin this cat yesterday was a complete failure. I mean, we could have seen this coming. We generally knew already what was going to happen. It was going to be forget fixing the underlying issue, just reach a ceasefire and stop fighting. And that's just, it's far too simplified. It's not looking at the underlying issues. It's not trying to fix the actual problem. This war was going to start over again. And I want to make it incredibly clear that the pursuit of peace is not a bad notion. The problem is that you have to pursue it with logic and reason. And also another thing is, just to be entirely honest with y'all, no matter how much logic or reason we wanted to reach in Thailand and Cambodia, there is no way that we could have reached a logic or reasonable peace in this region. They hate each other and they want to kill each other. And the Cambodians have made it pretty damn clear they want to kill the Thai more than the Thai want to kill them. And if a country is that adamant about keeping a war going, there was no way in hell we were going to stop them even if we tried to understand the underlying issues. There was no way at all. So I would generally say that this was pretty much a waste of time, at least in my opinion, because trying to force a ceasefire, it's not going to work. Y'all want a great example? Look at Ukraine. And look at how well us trying to force a ceasefire in the Ukraine-Russian war has gone. It's gone poorly. As a matter of fact, it's gone so poorly, we might be looking at World War III in Europe because it's gone that poorly. Look at all the ceasefires we negotiated in the Middle East. Every single one of them between Israel and Hamas has failed. The one that we currently kind of have with Iran is going to fail because they're still working towards a nuclear weapon. The one that we have with the Houthis failed because they went back to striking ships because they're a terrorist group. And the one with Pakistan and India, I am assured, is going to fail. Y'all wait and see. It will fail. And I could go through all the reasons. It's like an hour-long explanation, but it will fail. And just going around the world and trying to force ceasefires for the sake of making it look like, you're the peace president or you're the money president, that just doesn't work. I mean, like, it's a great concept on paper, does not work in real practice. It generally is something that will fail, and it's failed every time so far. The foreign policy needs to adapt and it needs to change, because peace is not always achievable. People don't like war, but it happens, and it happens for decent reasons, actually. That's what a lot of people don't really know. And being here in the business, folks, for 3.5 years, I can tell y'all that every war, everywhere, has started for some actual reason. They're not just started because some people, who are fat, dressed up in suits with loads of cash, want to sit there and get a little metal pin on their chest like they tell you about World War I and stuff. There are actual legitimate reasons that wars start around the world, and every single one that we've seen so far has some kind of a legitimate reason, and both sides actually have some sort of an argument or a dog in the fight, if you want to put it that way. And you have to understand that, and you actually have to address it that way instead of acting like it's a Pepsi commercial where you're Kylie Jenner and you go out there on the street and you whip out a Pepsi and the protesters and the cops stop fighting and they all get along. That's not how life works. So I hope that does address that the best I can, at least in my opinion. And I want to make it wildly clear that this is not a political statement at all. Once again, want to say, no policy in politics, or foreign policy for that matter, is a bad policy, as long as it's approached logically with good reason and it's sound. This was not a sound decision, and this wasn't approached soundly. It could have worked if it was approached soundly. It was not, and it's been a failure. And that's quite clear to see because the ceasefire's collapsed, and we have video and picture evidence to prove it. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what we can see right now. And with that in mind, we actually have to move on into a question segment, and then on into the rest of the news. I also have to tell you all really quickly that we will not really be able to go into any more tsunami news in the midst of the stream. We still have a lot to cover from around the rest of the world, and we'll have to try and cover that in the question segment if we get any additional news on it. So Matthew, what do we got?
All right, so jumping into our first super chat of our first segment here. This one is a very generous $200 donation from Hawk, who's a channel legend who throws in the largest super chat of the night. And thank you very much, Hawk, for that massive support and helping to get the channel running every single night with that support. He said, tell Putin Diddy that baby oil is on his way from the DPRK. Settle down, little boy.
Holy smokes. Dang. Well, I gotta tell you, Hawk. I think they're about I think the Russians are about a Hawk Tua. Wait, I forgot that woman is actually being hunted down by the SEC. I think, but beyond that, I do thank you for the support. And I gotta say, I think he might be on the way. Oh, by the way, folks, I actually did hear that apparently that earthquake near Kamchatka. I actually heard the reason for it, Matthew. Do you want to hear it?
What is it?
Apparently, Kim Jong-un has actually been on an official state visit to the Russian Federation, and he jumped off a diving board on the Kamchatka Peninsula and landed in the water, and that's what happened.
Interesting. Also, by the way, just to clear this up, the Hawk 2 person is not being hunted by the SEC. That's just a joke, and that's not true. So just to clear that up.
Just to clear that up. But beyond that, I do thank you for the support, Hawk, and helping this channel to keep on running. And I got to say that is one hell of a solid joke right there. And I got to thank you massively for the huge support once again and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep the thing running. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next super chat goes to David K, who puts in a $100 donation. And thank you very much, David K, for that very generous support as well. I did not see a comment attached to it, but thank you very much, David, of course, for that support. And we do sincerely do appreciate that. And I wish there was a comment, but sadly we don't have one. But Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you for the impressively massive support, David K, and helping this channel to keep on running, because it is folks like you who help to make this thing possible and help us to keep it rolling day by day. If it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. I gotta massively thank you so much once again, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we would have never been able to make this thing possible, never be able to keep this thing running. And I gotta thank you impressively for enjoying this channel so much that you want to support it so greatly, so that way we can continue to keep the news rolling out day in and day out. And so with that, thank you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the last question of this segment, and then we're going to be moving on into the rest of the news.
And this one goes to The Martian, who's also a channel legend and throws in another big, massive $100 donation. And thank you very much, Martian, for that support as well. He said, get you some coffee and keep on keeping on. And China has called USA technically tyrant, and Russia has pretty much disrespected us, so we might as well get it on, and General Patton had it right.
And I thank you for the incredibly massive support, The Martian. I gotta say, thank you for wanting us to get some coffee. As far as the Chinese and the Russians go, they are not America's friends. People have got to understand that, and people have also got to understand, just because China's cities light up at night does not mean that they're more advanced than us and they're going to win in a war. Like, that's something that a lot of people have got to eventually get, and apparently, if you make the building shiny, you're going to win everything. So maybe we need to start lighting up New York City, like a lot more than we do right now. Maybe we should. Maybe that'll make people think that America's really ahead of the game. But beyond that, I got to say that as far as diplomacy goes, I think we should be getting it on with both the Russians and the Chinese, and we should start to put a little bit more pressure onto the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China. So I would definitely agree with you. And a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this thing rolling, and we wouldn't be able to keep it on. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the rest of the news for the night. And we have quite a lot of it. Quite a lot of it indeed. Moving on down into the Middle East, we were able to hear in the state of Israel that the Israelis intercepted another Houthi missile, which we can see right here. And we see the interception.
This is really just like an annoyance at this point. It's not really like significant attacks. It's just like doing it for the hell of it.
It honestly isn't. It's a kind of like just a small little harassing thing to remind the Israelis that the Houthis exist. Outside of that, we also were able to hear that the Israelis are considering an annexation of the Gaza Strip, which is being met with a decent amount of international condemnation and a little bit of international support as well. We don't really know where the hell that's going to go, but it appears that that Netanyahu may be trying to move forward with forming Gaza into beachfront property. I'm not really sure on that, but kind of a wild thing that they actually are seriously considering that, at least according to sources we got today. Outside of that, we also were able to hear that there are now clashes between Hezbollah and the Syrian interim government near to the area of the Bekaa Valley between Lebanon and Syria, which we can see in this clip right here. Man, they got the police sirens and everything, bro. Damn.
They got it going.
Moving on from that clip, to explain why that was going on, 2 Syrian interim government officials were killed today by Hezbollah near to the Syrian border, so it appears that there are going to be some smaller skirmishes once again between Jelani's people and the people of Hezbollah. So looks like that little firefight's going to be happening again for the second time around. We also were able to hear inside the Islamic Republic of Iran that it appears to be new activity at the tunnel entrances of the Isfahan nuclear facility, which appears to be showing that they're trying to rekindle their uranium enrichment, specifically at the Fordow uranium enrichment plant. But with that, we are going to be moving on out of the Middle East and on up into Ukraine, because all that tsunami talk, folks, has got me a little bit pressed for time, so I'm trying to make sure that we get through all of this tonight. But nevertheless, we were able to hear that the president was disappointed that there was no response from the president of the Russian Federation. Wanted to make sure that we showed that we had a source for that really quickly. And moving on from that and on into Ukraine, we have been able to hear of other major developments over the course of the day. First off, we were able to hear that Ukrainian drone attacks conducted by the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense against Russia's major logistical structures in the Rostov Oblast have continued, with tonight's target being the city of Salsk. The city of Salsk is strategically located on one of Russia's main railway corridors, and also has a significant rail yard and railway station inside of its confines. For this reason, the state of Ukraine targeted and attacked the train station in Salsk tonight, which we can see in this clip right here. You want to see a Yudi slam into a train station? Well, it's your time, folks. Check it out. Flip to your mind. Oh, Lordy. And you see the fires cooking.
А как они его уберут?
It's probably going to blow up now, they say.
Короче, все, это...
Look, this is it. That's what she says. Look.
Короче, это пипец.
That's it, basically.
Look,
It's
it's
F.
basically
It's
screwed.
Slams the door back like they're going to keep it out. Like, get out, you. Like, it's like, bro, it's in the train station. You're good. That fire's cooking quite nicely, folks. Well, gotta be honest with you, folks. I think that Sauce got hit pretty badly. Y'all want to see a duplicate of the same clip? Well, we're not going to look at it, but we have it on the map just in case. And we also were able to see another clip of the fire in Salsk. Take a little look.
Мост. Горят цистерны. Тут тоже что-то горит. Там вдалеке тоже что-то
We were able to
горит.
confirm about 10 drones hit the city of Salsk, most of them around the railway station, so it appears that they were attempting to damage either the main line or the rail yards used here in Salsk.
Просто пиздец какой-то. Жопа.
Жопа.
Все сгорит сейчас нахуй. Больше 10 прилетов. Видно, надеюсь.
But that's seeing the clip right there, still showing us a little bit of a pretty heavy hit. It does appear that the Ukrainians are once again trying to knock out most of Russia's vital railway arteries heading to Rostov-on-Don, which is a significant railhead for Russian supply efforts inside of Ukraine, and it does seem that that might have a little bit of an effect here in the long run on Russian supply efforts inside of the state of Ukraine. But moving on from that and into the frontline action itself, we were able to see that the Russian Federation is continuing to build those little aircraft shelters around the Russian Federation. It took Operation Spiderweb to get them to try and even halfway modernize, and it still looks rough. I mean, like, a lot of this looks like it's made out of tin or something like that. Not really the greatest materials to use. But some of them are actually hardened shelters. Look at that. They're actually covering these with dirt. That's, like, crazy, right? Like, it's actually like they're putting a little bit of money into that one. But beyond that, oh, I like that. The Russian Federation is in a little rough one. Also, by the way, you know, Maddie, I have a big question. I just noticed that these hardened shelters here, you know how they have like that dirt covering to them and everything?
Right.
Okay, so they are like overlapping. How are the planes supposed to get out of the ones behind the others?
Well, see, I think this right here is a new Russian invention called the plane coffin. They go in and they don't come out because they don't have to worry about them coming back out because Ukraine's going to destroy this crappy structure anyway.
Man, in the words of B. Benson, Larry B. Benson from the B movie, they check in, but they don't check out. And they aren't. Like, I don't think they are. But moving on from that and on out of that news, as that joke apparently fell flat, we're going to be moving on into the Kursk Oblast, as we were able to see the Russians getting hit inside of Tekhino by Ukrainian armed forces. We can see that right here as the the Ukrainian 33rd Brigade targeted and took out this squad of Russians. And we can see the Russians moving through the town of Tekhino, and they're about to be moving out of Tekhino, spiritually. And we see the Ukrainians already hitting them with artillery and starting to target their positions.
It looks like they're at a crossroads here.
Man, it does look like they're at a crossroads. That's where the roads cross over each other. We can also see them...
It's also symbolic of the Russians here. They're at a crossroads. They have to figure out if they're going to go left or if they're going to go right. And they decided to go hard right. Now they're going off the path.
Man, in the words of Karl Marx, call this bit NASCAR because we could turn this thing hard left.
I'll tell you what.
Man, but anyways, moving on from that, we also got to see the Russians getting hit in Tekhino by Ukrainian airstrikes, which we can see right here. And we see them getting slammed quite heavily by the GBU-62s. And look at that. Would you look at that? What the? Also, I just saw someone had to get banned for asking probably the goofiest question of all time. I'm actually going to clarify that question because I have not seen one that's been that brainless in a minute. The reason why I was pointing out the issue, if they said they're staggered, you dork, it's like, well, duh. But the issue that this person may not be able to pick up on, they may be challenged in learning, is that this is a hardened shelter that is staggered. But the problem is that the sides of the hardened shelter, as you can see right here, actually go all the way out to the midpoint of the opening of the next hardened shelter. So that means that it's pretty much impossible to get a plane out of the hardened shelter once you get them in, because the actual edge of the other hardened shelter is obstructing half of the entrance of the other. And as we know, because we all went to kindergarten, 2 minus 1 is 1. So that means while you usually had the 2 opening hangar bay doors to slide the plane in, now you only have the 1 because the other one's blocked by the other half of the other hardened shelter, which is what I was pointing out. Just to make sure that we explained the whole humor of what this was looking like, because that was the whole thing, which some people may have not been able to pick up on, like that particular person, which is very unfortunate. But if they look, they might be able to realize it. Nevertheless, moving on from that and on into the area of the Kursk Oblast, near to the area of Suja, we also got to see the Ukrainians continue to attack logistics. This truck was on fire at a gas station almost. Very sad. Very, very sad. But moving on from that and out of that little bit of news and on down into our location unknowns, we also got to see a Ukrainian anti-air technical of the 53rd Brigade. The pic went hard. Feel free to screenshot. Moving on from that and on into our next bit of the location unknowns, we also got to see the Russian casualty report. No Bobcat skid steers, unfortunately.
Oh, damn.
Damn it! But Miss Nisa, keeper of the record, said first time with no AFVs since the 15th of December of 2024. And vehicles are also below average. Artillery numbers are back to above average. And over the past 24 hours, we have been able to see that 1,050 soldiers have been wounded and killed, along with 0 APCs, 91 supply trucks, 4 main battle tanks, 39 artillery pieces, 192 drones, 1 MLRS, 2 cruise missiles, and 1 anti-aircraft warfare system. Overall, today was not a great day for the Russian Federation, but they'll have to live with it nonetheless. Moving on from that and on into the front lines, today was the day of the firefight because we were able to see loads of Ukrainian combat footage showing them clearing out Russian positions and pushing them a little bit further back. These are not major breakthroughs by the Ukrainian offenses, but these are wiping out Russian trench lines and fighting positions at the moment, which we can see in these clips right here. You see them moving through the trees. This is near to the area of the town of Kupiansk. We see one Ukrainian soldier with a camera. He's like, bro, go forward. They're right there.
This is filmed on a Fisher Price.
I don't know what their slogan was, but I was going to say it, but I don't know their slogan.
I was about to say Little Tykes or something like that, but I don't think it was that. I think that was a different brand of something, but I guess you could call these fellas Little Tykes out here, you know, doing what they got to do, I guess. That made no sense, but let's just roll with it.
Oh, man. But it was an okay try. It was an okay try, you know? But let's see here. We can see them, we can see the cameraman, which might be their squad leader or fire team lead, telling them to spread out as they continue to quietly move through the trees. Shh. Be quiet, everyone. Oh, now they're not quiet anymore. Oh, look, it's a Russian. Please, don't shoot, he says. And the Ukrainians are like, get your ass up. And so he's getting up. Say, okay, cuff him. He's about to
How
say,
was that Russian just sitting there so quiet like that? Like, he's just sitting there in the corner. He literally had these people creep right up on him. He didn't even try to get away or anything.
I think Blood was caught sleeping, like literally.
Caught lacking in 180p.
Sleeping on the job. That's something you can't do in the military. Oh, you can hear a little explosion in the distance. Might be mortars. Oh, that might actually be rifle fire. Oh, yeah, that's rifle fire. And it appears the Russians are now opening fire.
Oh, блядь, they forgot their man was downrange.
Bro, the Russians heard the rustling of the leaves and went, oh, and then just started shooting right at their own people.
Oh, блядь, Baba Yaga, блядь. He's been possessed by the spirit of Baba Yaga.
We now see the Ukrainian SL speaking angry Ukrainian. He's yelling orders to his squad. And we see the Russian laying low. And the firefights are getting a little heavy now. We see them walking past the prisoner there.
Не проеби, брат, да. Только не проеби его, у него может быть ствол где-нибудь здесь или граната, блядь. Туда, ниже головы, ниже.
You see them slipping around under the trees.
Also, by the way, I don't mean to sidetrack here, but for the people asking, did whales wash up in the tsunami? They did. I see the footage of them washing up on the shores of Japan. The weird thing is, they're washing up on the shores of Japan, but I'm not really seeing any waves to go with it. So some people are getting a little bit weirded out by that. Like, why are the whales, like, beaching themselves on the beach, but there's no real waves coming with it? I really can't explain that. I'm not really sure, but we'll go over it during the final question segment.
And that we will. We just have to make sure to get through the rest of the news right here, folks, because we're starting to go overtime. And we now see them getting in a direct firefight with the Russians. Apparently this is a close-range firefight here in the tree line, but we can't see the Russians on the film. I hear a machine gun laying down some fire. Sounds like it might be an MG3, maybe.
Что там, блядь, есть? Туда хуйните гранату или что ли, блядь? Гранату туда! Только не в нас, блядь! Где? Где он сидит, блядь? Ну они наружу или в блиндаже, блядь? Граната дала сюда. Они снаружи или в блиндаже? Чё, блядь? В лёжке, блядь. Надеюсь, сдохнет, Павел. Все добро. Работаем.
Well, that's the end of that clip showing some of the firefights in Kupiansk. Moving further down the line and into Kremena and the Seberansky Forest, we were also able to see the Ukrainian Signum Mail unit hitting the Russian logistics. And you can tell by the camera edits here that there is some absolute trap remixes being played, but that we cannot play for copyright reasons. But they're pulling up on this Lada Neva. Now, it looks like it's
Look
about
at that Lada.
Bro, it looks like it's about to turn into a lot of Neva. Oh! And it did.
Man, that was like, what do they call it? Road rage during warfare right there. That guy looked out his window like, what do you want? B. And he looked off to the left and went, oh, oh no. It's like, stop the car, blядь, stop the car even.
Bro, he looked out the window like, damn, the bees are kind of loud. Oh my God. Like, he saw the drone. He's like, oh no. Oh, and that got a whole squad.
No.
Oh, no. But moving on from that clip and into another one, we also got to see Russian positions getting cleared out in Torske by the 41st Mechanized Brigade. Yeah, I want to see... Actually, I think this is the 63rd Brigade. What the hell was I saying, 41st? This is the 63rd. I was about to say, that's not the 60... That's not the 41st Brigade's emblem. That's the 63rd's. Well, we see the Ukrainians clearing them on out in the woods. And I see some people saying, "Oh, dang, that's crazy that the whales are washing up." Tsunamis, well, actually, this tectonic activity that creates a tsunami actually creates a low pressure area, and it's also quite loud underwater. The sound doesn't travel through the normal air much. Sound travels differently in water and over a great distance, and it's also incredibly loud. So those two things combined probably led the whales to panic and just start swimming away from whatever they heard, and that's probably what led them to beach. That would be my basic assumption, because I've heard that before for the explanation as why whales beach themselves during tsunamis, because it's actually a documented occurrence that's happened a decent amount before. But I might be mistaken. So anyone who would know better, y'all can correct me on that, because I'm not exactly a tsunami or marine biologist expert. So we can see the Russians coming out here from this bunker, and it looks like he's surrendering. Actually, it looks like a couple of them are surrendering. They're giving up. I can't keep this going. I surrender. And that they are. They processed 2 Russian prisoners today.
Go ahead and put your hands above your head. Call it a day. You know, you're getting a little tired. Go ahead and turn yourself in.
These Russians must be from Iraq. The way they, oh, well, that joke doesn't fit. I'm just going to stop it right there.
No.
But anyways, we can see the Ukrainians also targeting a Russian fire team and taking them on out. Boom, there you go. And here comes another Bada Booey. But moving on from that and on further down the line and into our next clips near to Pokrovsk, we also were able to see them hitting Russian forces in the 68th Yekero Brigade.
There was one Russian running off before he even got near the vehicle. He saw him running off down the street the other way. He was like a mile away from that car.
Dude, he was going like the cartoons. He was going crazy.
He was getting out of there.
Man, he was gone. But a lot of these guys aren't going. They're not gone. They're staying. Also, someone said, I thought you said the Welsh got washed up on the beach. No, the Welsh aren't worldwide like that. They're kind of regional. Our family is also Welsh, by the way, like historically, so the Welsh people don't take great offense. We're kind of Welsh like y'all, but not really. But moving on from that and into our next clip, we also got to see this Russian ammunition house exploding near Pokrovsk. You can hear it snap, crackling, and popping. And is that the Rice Krispies fellas I hear? Oh, Lord, they coming. Any second now. Any second. Snap, crackle, and pop. Oh! That thing's gone. Oh. And with that, we're going to be moving on to our next clip in Pokrovsk, where we also got to see some Russian forces getting slammed by none other than the 7th Army Corps. This unit emblem goes hard, actually, with the mace and the sword and the wing. That's actually pretty cool. And we see them taking out a basement.
Also, by the way, I'm getting some early reports right now from some California viewers in the chat that apparently they're getting some tsunami warnings on their phone right now. So kind of getting spicy right now on the West Coast. Oh, in fact, yeah, tsunami warning has been issued for parts of Northern California, including Crescent City and Eureka, according to BNO News. So apparently that is reaching our coast right now.
Dang, that's crazy, actually. That traveled a long distance fast, really. But beyond that, we also were able to hear that there was a spike in radiation near to the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant area. It is unknown what is causing this, but it is something that we are going to try and see, and it's an unconfirmed report at the moment. I want to make that clear. It's unconfirmed, but we are still waiting to see what additional details or information there may be. We also were able to see more Russian forces in the 40th Coastal Defense, the Ukrainians in the 40th Coastal Defense Force Brigade hitting the Russian forces near Kherson, which we're able to see right here. And also, folks, if you are in a tsunami-afflicted area or an area under tsunami warning, the smart thing to do is to try and seek higher ground. It doesn't have to be incredibly high, but it has to probably be at least a little bit above 200 feet above sea level, and you'll generally be safe if you're anywhere around there. That's at least what I'd assume. Take your authorities' information for better than what I'm saying. But we can see the 40th Brigade slamming these Russians. And that's the end of that clip. But great work by the 40th Coastal Defense Brigade. But moving on from that and on up into Kyiv, it's now time for us to get to the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1252 of the war. So, without further ado, here is the speech. Speech!
Шановні українці і українки, важкий сьогодні день. В Запорізькій області було багато загиблих та поранених. Був удар російських бомб по виправній колонії. Росіяни знали, що це цивільний об'єкт, не могли не знати. 16 людей убиті цим ударом. Мої співчуття. Ще 43 людини були поранені. Жорстокий удар також був по місту Кам'янське, по території лікарні. 3 людини були убиті. І ще багато поранених. Наша Харківщина. Теж російські удари, теж втрати. Донеччина – щодня удари. Росія абсолютно не звертає уваги на всіх у світі, хто прагне закінчити цю війну. Тільки вчора була дуже потрібна заява президента Сполучених Штатів Америки Трампа. Багато підтримки у світі, але все одно обстріли та навіть показові вбивства росіянами наших людей продовжуються. Кожен такий російський удар і російське хамство у відповідь на вимоги світу закінчити війну. Все це тільки підтверджує, що тиск потрібен. Більше санкцій потрібно проти Росії, стабільна підтримка України та нашого захисту життя, скоординована дипломатія заради миру. Я хочу подякувати всім, хто саме так працює разом з нами. Сьогодні я говорив з прем'єр-міністрами Канади та Данії. Чітка підтримка. Ми обговорили потреби нашого захисту, потреби нашої оборони. Я дякую також за сильні позиції в комунікації з іншими нашими партнерами. Ми маємо однаково сприймати загрози, ми маємо однаково реагувати. Я ціную позицію Данії на підтримку нашого руху в Євросоюз. І того, що умови для України та інших країн щодо вступу повинні бути справедливі. Зокрема, умови і все, про що ми домовлялись в контексті вступу України та Молдови. Країни Балтії, країни Північної Європи, всі інші наші друзі на континенті. Я хочу подякувати кожному за підтримку України. Ми говорили із Метте, прем'єр-міністром Данії, і з прем'єр-міністром Канади про мій законопроект, який гарантує нормальну роботу антикорупційної інфраструктури і інших органів правопорядку. Дуже важливо ухвалити цей закон в четвер. Всі партнери це підтримують. І сьогодні ми обговорили з представниками Верховної Ради України, з нашими урядовцями. Результат має бути забезпечений. Сьогодні ж прем'єр-міністр України Юлія Свириденко доповіла мені про проектні рішення. Зокрема, є зміни до бюджету, щоб гарантувати всі необхідні виплати нашим воїнам та рідним полеглих воїнів. Були певні деталі, які потребують законодавчого рішення. Я розраховую, що народні депутати підтримують. Також уряд вже підготував розширення програми контрактів 18-24, щоб програма залучала мотивованих людей саме для роботи з дронами. Юлія Свириденко представить цю програму. Сьогодні ж я підписав та направив до Верховної Ради України законопроект. Законопроект фактично про повагу для воїнів, які відзначаються Хрестом бойових заслуг. Це об'єктивно висока нагорода, але де юре зараз Хрест бойових заслуг є відзнакою, яка має символічну вагу. Ми зробимо, щоб нагорода давала воїнам реальні речі. І за ієрархією нагород Хрест бойових заслуг буде на рівні між званням Героя України та орденом Богдана Хмельницького. Станом на сьогодні Хрестом бойових заслуг відзначені 318 воїнів. І кожен заслуговує на нашу з вами вдячність. Я прошу Верховну Раду України оперативно підготувати цей законопроект до голосування. Ще одне. Цими днями вже фіналізуються домовленості з нашими партнерами про кошти на дрони. Ще плюс 400 мільйонів євро для наших українських компаній, для наших українських виробників дронів. Зайдуть на рахунки виробників в Україні протягом цього тижня. Домовленість Україна-Нідерланди. Всі завдання по виробництву дронів на цей рік виконуємо, і саме так виконуємо, як потрібно. Сьогодні ж я відвідав на Київщині дуже сильну компанію, яка створює нашу українську електроніку. Компоненти для ракет, для дронів. Я дуже подякував працівникам компанії, команді підприємства. Коли наші удари по російській території відбуваються, ми маємо не забувати, це робота багатьох компаній, багатьох людей, державного і приватного секторів, української єдності, того, що працює найкраще. Найкраще для України, найкраще для наших людей. Дякую вам. Слава Україні!
Героям слава!
And with that, that is the end of the speech from President Volodymyr Zelensky here on day 1,252 of the news of the war in Ukraine. And before we move on, Matthew, I understand a great deal of information that we have more news about the tsunami.
Yes, we do. Real quick, let me fix something real quick here. There we go. So, all right. Actually, take it over for just a second. I got to fix a technical error on my end.
All right, so we have a technical error on Enforcer Matt's end, and so I'll be taking over for a brief moment. I'll be taking the helm really quickly to tell you all that the tsunami that's going to be hitting the west coast of the United States, at least from official reports, is not going to be that large. It appears at the tallest it's going to be somewhere around possibly a few feet tall. It looks like, really quickly, let me make sure that I read this correctly. Let's see, where in the world was it? Did it go away? Where in the world was it? I saw something that said that the actual areas hit by the tsunami, at least on the west coast, the highest is going to be as a foot in most areas, maybe about 2 or 3 feet in a very few amount of areas near to Crescent City and Eureka, I believe. But that shouldn't be too large, and so hopefully the tsunami damage on the west coast will be minimal. But once again, folks, we're just speaking off of what we've been able to hear. Of course, make sure to listen to and pay attention to your authorities, your local authorities, far more than you would to us, especially if you're on the west coast at the moment, because it does sound like there's a small earthquake coming in, at least for now. And so with that, Matthew, has the technical issue been fixed?
Yes, I have fixed a technical issue. So I was going to jump into some news here real quick about the tsunami on a different front. So far, we're hearing news that apparently the tsunami has been detected at Midway on the way to Hawaii from Alaska. So that's what we're hearing right this second. So there is Midway, I believe, that we're looking at right here on the map.
Yeah.
So it is on its way down to Hawaii from Alaska. Also, by the way, we did hear a tsunami warning has been issued for parts of Northern California, including Crescent City and Eureka, according to BNO News that we're hearing right this second as well. And we're also hearing some more news as well that apparently it looks like, I was trying to see here, I just reposted it. It looks like down there in Hawaii, there is an order, or the U.S. Coast Guard captain of the port in Honolulu has ordered all commercial vessels to evacuate all commercial harbors across the state of Hawaii, at least according to a recent report that we're seeing right here. So it looks like Hawaii is expecting to get hit pretty hard by the tsunami that's coming down there. So it looks like it could be a pretty big hit.
Dang, that's wild to hear. And we also have some footage and videos, Matthew. I believe that we do. So let's show that to the folks here really quickly. We have been able to see the damage at Severokurilsk, which we were showing a little bit earlier, the aftermath of. This is actually what the tsunami caused at Severokurilsk, which was about 80 kilometers away or less from the epicenter. Quite significant damage.
That is very significant. That is a hell of a lot of damage right there.
I mean, that is quite serious, as a matter of fact.
Also, by the way, my tech glitch, it's kind of a bit of a doozy here. I was trying to send you a text to let you know that we had some news, and I accidentally sent the text to our CPA. So I was trying to undo that text. So that way I didn't wake up my CPA in the middle of the night. So yeah, I was trying to undo that. So I got that undone, unsent. So that way the CPA didn't wake up in the middle of the night saying, "I got news," and what do you mean? I was like, "Oh, sorry about that."
Oh, well, that's quite an interesting technical glitch right there. But beyond that, we can see the tsunami backwash here, and it is quite significant. And just look at it. But nevertheless, moving on from that clip and on into the next one, we also were able to hear about a Chinese naval base. We'll be skipping past that for a little bit. We also were able to see the beached whales in Japan, but we won't be able to show that clip, most likely due to copyright reasons. But this is a tsunami warning that was issued for Northern California. Bulletin, tsunami message number 5. NWS National Tsunami Warning Center in Palmer, Alaska, 8:27 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, Tuesday, July 29th of 2025. All of that lines up to today in their time. This, blah, 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 blah. Let's see, coastal areas including Cape Mendocino, California to the Oregon-California border. The tsunami warning is modified to include the coastal areas of California from Cape Mendocino to California, Cape Mendocino, California to the Oregon-California border. If you're located in this coastal area, move inland to higher ground. Tsunami warnings mean that a tsunami with significant inundation is possible or is already occurring. Tsunamis are a series of waves, dangerous many hours after initial arrival time. The first wave may not be the largest. At 4:25 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on July 29th, an earthquake with a preliminary magnitude of 8.8 occurred 80 miles southeast of Petropavlovsk, Kamchatka. Estimated tsunami start times for selected sites are Crescent City, California, 11:50 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time of July 29th. The tsunami warning will remain in effect until further notice. Refer to internet site tsunami.gov for more information. That is currently the tsunami bulletin put out at the moment. We can also see that the tsunami has been detected at Midway. That is Midway Island. The Battle of Midway happened there. And the tsunami was detected. You can see it has that blip right there. That is the height of the feet in, the height of the ocean or water levels in meters. And it does appear that it's now high tide, at least around Midway because of the tsunami. We also were able to see but the Coast Guard captain did order all commercial vessels to evacuate all commercial harbors across the state of Hawaii. All harbors are now closed to incoming vessel traffic due to the tsunami threat. And that appears to be all of the news and information that we have at the moment, but it appears that most parts of the West Coast, if y'all were paying attention to the bulletin, appear to be affected in 11:30 midday tomorrow. So it's not going to be a direct issue or a problem, at least for now, at least from what I could see on the bulletin. So generally, we're just keeping up to date with the updates and information that's going to be coming out. But with that, it is time for us to move on into a bowl, because we do have a little poll at the moment about Aeroflot, something that I did not cover in the middle of our news tonight, and luckily I didn't because we were running overtime. But nevertheless, Russia, Aeroflot was actually crippled by a cyber attack. And Matthew, what are a lot of people thinking about that? What are you thinking about it as well?
Okay, so the news article basically told us that Aeroflot got hit with a really, really horrific cyber attack, and some estimates are it'll take them months to recover from the damage. And yesterday, when the cyber attack occurred, it caused widespread flight delays, also systems to go down, and Aeroflot being Russia's largest airline, that's a huge hit. So who do you think did it, basically? 61% said Ukraine likely did it, while 17% said a NATO country probably carried it out, and 11% said it could have been someone else. And I believe most likely it could have been a Ukrainian hacking group that did it. It's always possible that maybe it was an internal Russian hacking group, if I can speak. That's also possible as well. It could be a disgruntled group that doesn't like the government that pulled it off. That's also possible, but it's really hard to tell. But one thing's for certain, though, I think Aeroflot might have a new opening for maybe some new leadership because Putin doesn't take kindly to things like this happening, and he's probably going to blame somebody else for the failure that led to one of Russia's largest airlines being taken down yesterday. But Enforcer, what say you?
I would have to say that I'm with the 61%. The Ukrainians likely did it. It would make sense. It would generally line up. And they've done cyber attacks of significant scales like these before. So I would generally have to be with the 61% just due to the historical precedent. It's highly likely the Ukrainians. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least to my knowledge and abilities. And with that, it is time for us to move on into the question segment itself, where we get to talk to all of y'all. And boy, howdy, is it a fun segment. We always enjoy it greatly. But before we get on into that, I do have to thank the 16,000 live viewers who are here tonight for watching up till this point, and also the 113,000 people who've watched this stream up to this point as well. We're always honored and very appreciative that a lot of y'all give us your time for multiple hours a day, every single day, to listen to our news updates from around the world. And it's absolutely amazing and incredible to know that a lot of y'all were once again here tonight. If y'all did enjoy, please be kind and subscribe. We are up to 479,610 subscribers, and we are just inching that little way closer every day to 500,000 subscribers, or 500,000. And if you subscribe right now, you might be one of those 500,000 subscribers, or you might be getting really close to 480. That's a lot closer than 500,000. But nevertheless, please make sure to subscribe, folks. We would love to have y'all here, and there's nothing wrong with the LSA or the Enforcer channel. It's a great channel filled with great, amazing people. Sometimes we say things, and sometimes we joke about things. It's kind of what most YouTube channels do. But we would love to have y'all here because we joke and say things in some ways that are more interesting, entertaining, or informative than others, possibly. I can't say that for certain, because that's allegedly. And everything's allegedly these days, folks, because of litigation. But nevertheless, it is time for us to move on into the questions at large. And Matthew, what kind of questions do we allegedly have tonight?
All right, so jumping into our final question segment of the night, we do have here some news, apparently, or actually not some news. We actually have a super chat returning back to a super chat we had earlier. This one goes to David K. He actually wanted us to take one from the live chat. He said that after we addressed the super chat, but I wanted to return back to it to grab that live chat question in honor of David K's $100 support. And the live chat question is going to go to Miss Disa, who said, what is the chance of a Putin-Trump meeting in September? Is it just rumor, or is it actually going to happen?
I have a feeling it's going to largely be unlikely. And if it does happen, there's not really going to be a lot coming out of it. So either way, it won't really mean a lot. So I would say most likely not. But if it happens, not really a lot's going to come out of it either. But generally the reason why I wouldn't believe it's going to happen, and I'm largely leaning in that direction, is because this 10-day deadline is going to wind down, and once that 10-day deadline winds down, we're most likely going to start applying sanctions to the Russian Federation. If we're taking the president's word for something, there's going to be sanctions applied against the Russian Federation, and further armed support is going to be given to Ukraine. And under those circumstances and conditions, Putin will simply not accept meeting the president of the United States. So I generally would say that it's more so a rumor at this point than a confirmed certainty, because everything else would be showing, at least from what we can tell and see right now, Putin would not be willing or really that happy to meet with the president of the United States. And he wasn't really happy to meet with the prior president of the United States either, or the president before him, or the president before him. So I generally say I don't think he's going to be meeting with him. If he does, it still won't result in anything. So with that, I hope that does address that live chat well. To Miss Disa, a channel legend and an all-guard. And I gotta say, a huge thanks to you once again, David K, for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And thank you for sponsoring a live chat. We're sorry we missed that a little bit earlier, but we are more than happy to get a live chat in your honor. And a big thanks to you once again for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. We wouldn't be able to make it possible. We wouldn't be able to get live chats. We wouldn't be able to cover the news at all. So a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are allegedly on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat here. This one goes to Stuart Sampson, who puts in a $25 donation, and also I'm a Hot Man, who puts in a $13 donation. And thank you both, Stuart and I'm a Hot Man, for that support. We do appreciate that very, very much. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank Stuart and I'm a Hot Man for the support, because both of y'all's support was thrown in without comments, but the support is absolutely incredible. And it absolutely helps us to keep this channel running. We say this like a broken record with every single super chat, but it's because it's true. We wouldn't say if it wasn't true. Y'all are actually responsible for helping this channel to keep running day in and day out. Y'all help us to pay our bills, to keep the lights on, to do all kinds of incredible things, like heat. If we did not have y'all's support, we couldn't eat. And for that reason, we are massively appreciative and thankful for your support, both of y'all's support, because y'all are helping the enforcers to keep alive behind the scenes, to be able to do this as their full-time job, and to cover this news every day. So a big thanks to both of y'all so much once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next super chat goes to Doug, who puts in a $22 donation, and thank you, Doug, as well, for that support. He said LSA and take one from the chat.
And long live the Lee Spring Army, Doug. A huge thanks for being here tonight, and a massive thanks for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And we will make sure to give one from the chat in your honor, Doug. So, Matthew, what do we got in a live chat in honor of Doug?
And this live chat goes to Rusty, who said, do you think the tsunami was caused by Russians on purpose, maybe a nuke that was underwater, or is that far-fetched?
I have a feeling it's far-fetched, at least in my opinion, and that's not to say, not to like just throw the thing under, and beat it to death, but the thing is that it happened right here on the tectonic plate between the Pacific plate and the Eurasian plate, so it would be a little unlikely that it was some sort of a nuclear test or something along those lines, because also nuclear tests don't really create a lot of seismic activity. They create something, at least in a localized area, around a 5 or less on the Richter scale usually, and also a nuclear bomb being blown up on the side of a tectonic plate doesn't really have the ability, from what we understand, to actually create a major seismic event because of the size, weight, and everything else involved in the tectonic plate. A nuclear bomb blowing up on one actually doesn't really do too much. So from what I would generally understand, I do not think that this would be anything that the Russians had any actual involvement in. It would be more so the fact that this was just a normal geological occurrence. The Pacific Rim, as a geographical fact, is very unstable. A lot of volcanoes exist around it. It is also seismically unstable. That's why places like Japan and California, which are right on the Pacific Rim, have to pretty much build a lot of their buildings to be earthquake-proof because it's such a seismically active area. So I would generally say that it's more so normal seismic activity. Although it's abnormal in its size, it's still generally normal. And that would be the best explanation I can give. If y'all want some proof of the seismic activity or the volcanic activity along the Ring of Fire, or the Pacific Rim as it's called, the best examples that I can give are actually inside of Washington and Oregon State. Y'all see these little mountains right here? Like Mount Rainier, and also Mount St. Helens, and Mount Adams, and then down here, Mount Hood, and Mount Jefferson, and South Sister, and Mount Bachelor. All of those are volcanoes. Every single one of them. They're not really that active, well, except for Mount St. Helens, but they're not really that active for now, but all of them are major volcanoes, and they're generally dormant for now, but they can become active at any moment, and those were created because of the Pacific tectonic plate pushing up on the North American tectonic plate, crunching the area, and it would end up creating these volcanoes. That's also why you'll see that there's a significant mountain range here along the west coast that has nothing to do with the Rockies, which are generally inside of Colorado, Montana, Idaho, and elsewhere. That was created because of the pressing of the tectonic plates, and that is also the same thing that happened in Japan. That's why Mount Fuji exists, because it was also created under similar pressures because of the shifting of the tectonic plates in this area, which actually created a soft spot, or a little kind of a shallow area in the crust within that area, which allowed for Mount Fuji to slowly form. And now it exists today. Funnily enough, also another little bit of an interesting fact, Mount Fuji is actually the same height. It's only 200 feet shorter than Mount Rainier, giving us an idea that both of these volcanoes were generally formed around the same period of time as each other, because they ended up evolving to be about the same height. So a little bit interesting with that. But you'll find that really everywhere. Like even in the Kamchatka Peninsula, there's a lot of volcanoes of different types throughout the area. All of these are volcanoes, and every single one of them is on the Pacific Rim. So that's generally what I'm assuming. It's most likely abnormal but normal seismic activity, the best way I can explain it. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And we have a $20 support from LSA Sergeant Figment. And thank you very much, Sarge, for that $20 support yet again. And he said, in my opinion, if the Israelis don't annex Gaza, then we will see this whole situation repeat itself every 5 to 10 years. And I'm not a fan of annexation, but as long as terrorists are in charge of the area, I do not see any other solution.
And I thank you for the support, LSA Sergeant Pigman, and that's a little bit of a tricky one. Me, personally, I'm not really a big fan of annexation under most circumstances, except for ones that are exceptionally rare, like, for example, the situation with the Druze. And even then, I wouldn't say that annexation would be the most fruitful option. I think that generally creating a semi-autonomous region or an independent country within that area would probably be the best. But I think the best way to deal with the terrorism situation in the Gaza Strip would be to deal with their sugar daddy, pretty much, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran. If we were able to wipe out Iran's government for the larger part and replace it with one that is not as extreme, a lot of these terrorist forces like the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah would pretty much lose a lot of their funding. And as a result of that, a lot of their terrorist operations would cease to exist. They might be extremists, but no one's giving them the money to buy guns, and no one's smuggling the guns to them in the first place. And nobody's giving them the money to keep funding their operations. So they would generally naturally start to subside and cease at that point. I think, me personally, though, an annexation of the Gaza Strip is not necessarily the greatest idea, because I don't really know what that would mean for the future of Gaza or for the future of Israel, really, to be entirely honest. It could end up causing a lot of domestic situations internally inside of Israel that may not be great, and it may also cause a lot of domestic situations inside of Gaza, which may not also necessarily be the greatest thing. I think that generally the best route to the source would be destroying the Islamic Republic of Iran, or really destroying their government is the best way to put it. So I would generally be against annexation, in my honest opinion, because I think there's another way that we can deal with it that would be beneficial, not just in the situation with the Gaza Strip, but beneficial for Lebanon, beneficial for Yemen, and beneficial for pretty much the entire region around, would be taking care of the Iranians. So with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. A huge thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running, and we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, and our next one here goes to Randy Smith, and Randy put in a $20 donation, and a huge shout out to you, Randy, for that support, and also helping to keep the channel running. He said, what if we put, is that 100,000 or 10,000? I think it's 100,000.
100,000.
Yeah, what if we put 100,000 U.S. troops in Europe, and maybe Poland would be a good spot, and it would be a deterrence toward Russia, and they harm one American troop, and then the Americans can get involved?
I would say that's not a bad idea, Randy Smith. I'd actually say that that's a pretty good start. Right now, we have about 40 to 50,000 troops inside of Europe. Generally, they're all combined, though, under the EUCOM and AFRICOM areas of responsibility. But right now, at the moment, we have two fighting brigades, if we want to put them that way, and one support brigade in the entirety of Europe. And then the rest of the service members are all made up of the Air Force, so on and so forth. But as far as ground forces inside of Europe, there are very few, because those fighting brigades make up about 7,000 troops, and the support brigade probably makes up another 5 to 6,000. It's not really a lot in terms of ground fighting forces. And I think that if we were able to start dispositioning a greater deal of forces, not exactly into Poland, because that could start to be taken as the Russians as a preparation for a preemptive attack. If we station them inside of Germany, however, that allows us to put these forces in Europe, where they can rapidly respond to a situation in Kaliningrad or the Suwalki Gap. They would only be days away from reaching the front at that point. And that would be as advantageous enough a position we could get in Europe without panicking the Russians where they might start something themselves. Because we always have to remember that our actions have some sort of an equal reaction, and if we put all of those into Poland, at least if we were talking in ground forces alone, that would be about another 20 brigades at least, or somewhere around there roughly, and that can end up causing some pretty considerable issues, considering that there's only, from what I understand, I believe there's 2 brigades in Europe. One of them's at Cogolasanu in Romania, and another one, I forgot the exact name of the town in Poland, but they're headquartered out of a town within northern Poland somewhere. And so if we were to move 20 extra brigades on top of that singular brigade that we have there right now, it might freak them out. It actually probably would freak them out a great deal, especially considering that the American military is far more powerful than theirs and could generally beat them in an open fight. We probably will want to put them in Germany instead, as more of a rapid reaction force. And that also allows us to use them as a rapid reaction force or a reserve force, because if that brigade gets attacked inside of Poland, we kind of want to know where they're getting attacked from and who's attacking. If it's the Belarusians, we can send these brigades, some of them, towards the Belarusian front. And then if the Russians start another offensive out of Kaliningrad, those brigades have the mobility to be able to move to that front. Because if we put them all up inside of Poland, that means the Russians might be able to fix them in position by attacking first. Because if they attack first, they are going to be rapidly advancing because there's going to be practically no resistance, and they're going to advance as far as they can without reaching resistance. So that means that if we put a lot of these brigades spread out around Poland, they might actually be in the line of a Russian advance, and if they are, they're going to get fixed in place through the firefights they'll be involved in, and if they attempt to retreat at that point to reorganize and then create some sort of a strategic reserve, they're most likely going to start taking losses, because any sort of a retreat under fire will start to take decent amounts of losses. So maybe putting an additional 2 to 3 combat brigades inside of Poland, man, we could really make those a mix. And then leaving a greater deal of heavier brigades, like armored brigades and mechanized brigades, inside of Germany, along with our logistical support brigades. That probably would be the best move we could make, because we don't really want to put American soldiers in the line of danger to where we're pretty much enticing the Russians to attack us, or we're, just putting them under danger in the hope that we'll be able to have a proper casus belli of defense. But we want to be in a position good enough to where if they attack, they really won't make it far, and they'll probably be overwhelmed by superior firepower early on enough that they don't take a large amount of ground, and a lot of their offensive momentum is pretty much killed off in the first opening days, or maybe the first opening week of the fighting. So with that, I thank you so much for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running, and I hope that does address that well, at least with the kind of strategic deterrent policy I would take. If I was the Secretary of Defense and I was in charge of this sort of thing, that's generally what I would do. Or if I was the president, this would be the kind of strategy I would be going for. Because Poland, also, by the way, I'd have to say, folks, I would not really put any forces in the Baltics. The Baltics are our ally, and they are a great group of countries. The issue is that they are logistically and strategically vulnerable to encirclement, and it could happen quick, to the point that we might not be able to respond, and we might not be able to break through in time. And that's something that is a little bit concerning, because if the Russians whip out the Baltic fleet quickly and they get into the Baltics, we're going to have to clear them out before we can even get to supplying the Baltics. And if the Russians start offensives at Narva, towards Vilnius, and across the Latvian border, along with offensives out of Kaliningrad, that area is being overrun pretty rapidly, especially with the amount of forces we have present there. And also with the supply availability that they have there, it would be a pretty tough fight. So it would probably be better to put most of our forces into Poland, because our first priority and our main issue in that sort of a conflict would be breaking through the Suwalki Gap and opening it back up to supplies, and then also crushing Kaliningrad, so that way we can make sure that that supply corridor is as large as it possibly can be, and also stop the threat of future encirclement by the Kaliningrad Oblast. So I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to do deep analysis like this on air, and we wouldn't be able to talk about the tactical and strategic possibilities and inevitabilities of a conflict in Europe at the moment. So a big thanks to you so much once again, and with that, it is time for us to move on to the also, I saw someone say, the Baltic, you mean NATO's lake? Yeah, it's pretty much NATO's lake at this point. The whole thing's surrounded by NATO. But the problem is that if the Russians make it through the gauntlet of the Gulf of Finland, which they might be able to, they will start to cause major issues throughout the entirety of the Baltics, especially if the subs make it out, because then that means that we would have to escort every single supply ship in the area with a destroyer. Some of these supply ships could get destroyed, further hampering the supply side situation. A whole bunch of things could happen as a result of that. So really, like, honestly, one of the first major things that I think we need to do in the defensive alliance to prepare for that eventuality is to create a network of high-tech microphones, pretty much. I forgot what they're called in the water. What are they called, man? Do you know what they're called, Maddie? They're the underwater microphones.
It's like those aquatic acoustic devices or something. It's just basically like a fancy word for a microphone, basically, I think.
It's like a seismic. It's not a seismograph. It's something else. A seismophone or something like that. We need to layer the Gulf of Finland at its narrowest point with those, because if a submarine is trying to make it through, they are going to make noise. You can a hydrophone. That's what it is. Thank you, Obojawami. It is a hydrophone, but we need to fill the sea in this area with hydrophones, because if any sub's going to make it through, they've got to make it through there. And while it technically will kind of be in international waters, who gives a damn? They're not going to know. So we'll put it there. Like, we'll put them all there. And if they ever pass over them, we'll hear them. And then we'll know that a sub is trying to break out. And if a sub is trying to break out, we can take them out as NATO combined. If they make it into the Baltic, we know how many of them made it into the Baltic, because of how the hydrophones are laid out, like they are on the East Coast. You can actually hear them and pretty much geolocate their exact location, at least in coordinate form, of where they are. So if they're heading west out into the Baltic, we can hear them heading west. If they're heading east back towards Kotland Island, we can also hear them doing that as well. So we would be able to keep an active tab on how many of their subs are making it into the Baltic and how many of them are out there at the outset of war. And if they're out there, we can immediately start conducting anti-sub warfare actions in that area to try and clear them out, because that would probably be the most important thing to do at the outbreak of a conflict, at least in terms of keeping the supply lines open to the Baltics. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least from what I know. And with that, folks, it is time for us to move on to the next one.
All right, so jumping into our next super chat. This one goes to Alex Johnson. He just threw in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Alex, for that support as well. He said, in your opinion, what are the chances, percent-wise, that we see a full-blown war between NATO, China, and Russia within the next 3 years? And what would this war look like after the first round is fired? And what could we do here at home to prepare?
That is a great question, actually, and I got to thank you for the support. So the first thing that we would have to do is we would have to prepare for the war. What that would largely appear as is just congressional spending bills that allow for more funding for the military for munitions requisitions. It's not necessarily always about equipment, and that's what a lot of people don't know. You can have tens and tens of thousands of artillery pieces, but if you only have several tens of thousands of shells, each one of those artillery pieces gets to fire a couple of rounds and then they're out. You want a large and pretty much endless supply of munitions. And considering that the United States still has sulfur mines, coal and iron deposits that are still heavily accessed, at least within the western parts of the country, munitions production is still quite easy for us. And also considering that the semiconductor industry is moving to the United States in the form of TSMC here in the future, that also means that we are still able to produce smart-guided munitions by every single metric domestically in the United States, and we can rapidly upscale that if we need to. But I think that we need to start putting in the groundwork now to be able to rapidly upscale that when necessary. So the Congress needs to start putting funding into that for pretty much precautionary wartime preparations for war industry. The other thing that we need to do is we need to build up generally the abilities of the Navy. I've got to say that time and time again, because the Navy is going to be the most important branch in this upcoming conflict, because the Air Force can't be everywhere and do everything, and the Air Force will not be able to deal with the supply necessities that we'll have around the world at all if all of this kicked off at the same time. So the Navy needs to be built up in the terms of destroyers that we have, in the terms of attack submarines that we have, and we also need to build it up in the terms of fleet auxiliaries. Aircraft carriers are great, but generally in this war, we're looking more so for anti-sub protections or anti-sub warfare, and we're also looking for an ability to strike at enemy merchant shipping, which generally all is focused around the sub. So it generally would be best to have a larger amount of destroyers, a larger amount of subs, and also a larger amount of fleet auxiliaries, which are pretty much supply ships. Once we build those out, to be in a large enough number, we can deal with the Chinese pretty easily, because dealing with China will have to pretty much consist of multiple thousand-mile-long supply lines that are taking a rapid consumption of munitions, because the Chinese are going to be firing day and night at the Navy. The Navy is going to be expending lots of missiles and lots of firepower to be able to deal with those incoming missiles. They're going to require resupplies heavily to stay in the fight consistently. So we are going to have to keep a very consistent and very large amount of munitions heading into the Pacific. Generally beyond that, though, that's really all we have to care about in the Pacific, because if we win the naval battles, we win the war. That's how it works in the Pacific. It's an island hopping kind of a campaign, just like it was in World War II. The Chinese would have to make it onto the island of Taiwan, which means if you can stop their air force and navies from being able to break Taiwan for a ground invasion, they'll never make it to a ground invasion, and that war is won. Europe is a whole other animal, however, because Europe's war would actually be on the land. So for that reason, Europe's war is a lot more intensive, at least in terms of the moving parts. One, we have to deal with the Russian Navy, because while the Russian Navy is weak on paper and technologically in every way, the Russian Navy still poses a threat if they're uncontested. So we would still have to find a way to contain Russian submarines like the Kilo class, and we'll also have to find a way to contain their surface fleet as well. We'll also have to be able to have some sort of an ability or a pre-prepared sort of a strategic position in Europe to be able to rapidly deploy multiple combat brigades and also have their supporting logistics brigades in theater pretty much at the outbreak of the war, which means that we'll have to move a lot more U.S. forces into Europe. Another thing that we'll have to do is we'll have to have a decent amount of the Air Force at least involved in SEAD operations in Europe first before anywhere else to be able to deal with any kind of Russian air defense threats that are posed. Russian air defense is not as strong as we originally anticipated from what we can tell in the war in Ukraine, but it still poses a threat to conventional air operations of the U.S. Air Force. Seed operations would be a priority, especially around Kaliningrad. Kaliningrad's going to be completely cut off from supply, and if we are able to destroy those S-400s and S-300s in Kaliningrad, they're not really going to be able to get any more inside of Kaliningrad. So then the skies of Kaliningrad, at a minimum, are open to air-to-ground support, which means that we're able to start wiping out the Kaliningrad garrison pretty quickly and take Kaliningrad. That's a really important thing. We can also use rocket artillery for that as well, but that still requires reconnaissance to be able to find where those air defense batteries are at, and then hit them and knock them out. So that would be a very important thing to achieve, at least for the Air Force inside of Europe. Once we get that done, the Air Force could shift over to the Pacific and largely coordinate most of its efforts inside the Pacific in support of the Navy. But beyond that, it would generally be up to the Army to be able to carry the fight the rest of the way, along with the rest of the forces of NATO. NATO's air power is strong enough in Europe that it doesn't really require the U.S. Air Force to be there in full force, so the U.S. Army could work with a multinational force made up of multiple NATO countries, supported by their air forces, while the U.S. Air Force and Navy are pretty much fighting out the war in the Indo-Pacific. So that's generally what it would look like. That's what you would want to prepare, and that's generally where you would want the most attention to be put in different categories to try and see that there would be the best success possible in that sort of a conflict, at least from what I could see. And once again, I'm not the Secretary of Defense, and I'm also not a general in the Pentagon, so I'm sure that they could come up with a lot better strategies, doctrines, or tactics than I ever could, but that's generally what I would say would be the top basic priorities for that sort of a confrontation. But Matthew, what are you thinking?
I would agree with you 100%. I was almost verbatim.
Do you think it is the grandest and greatest strategy and no one's ever come up with a greater strategy? Would you say that I'm the greatest strategist to ever live?
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't ever say that about anything, really. There's always ways to improve everything, but it's pretty solid, though. I think it's a good start.
Well, I think it's a decent start, a square start. Also, by the way, I'm just kidding, folks, about being the greatest strategist. I'm certainly not, but it's at least a decent start, at least in my opinion. And then you also have to deal with a whole bunch of additional minor details, which would take years to cover, and that's why we're not doing that tonight, because that would take years. But with that, a big thanks to you so much once again for support. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, and jumping into our next super chat, this one goes to S. Pedro, and he said, NATO uses a base in Soloi, Lithuania, Baltic air policing, and they have escorted any Russian intrusion.
And I thank you for support, S. Pedro. And that is true that we have one base in Poland, but as far as U.S. ground forces, let's see, U.S.
Well, he said Lithuania.
Oh, Lithuania.
Yeah, in Lithuania.
Man, I read that as Poland, bro. I'm terrible at reading. I'm sorry. But correction there. It is actually Poland. I mean Lithuania. Damn it, I did it again. but beyond that, let's see. Let's see here. Matthew, he's tired of it. He's pretty tired of it. But beyond that, let's see. Let's go try and find this air base. Oh, here it is. So it'll be around this city, and it's this one right here. Where are the air shelters for the aircraft at this base? Dang, where is it? Anyone? Hello? Where the hell are the aircraft? It's like every single paddock is completely abandoned around here. Oh, here they are. Yes, the cubes. We like to put the cubes out. To cover the aircraft and stop them from burning up and everything. But beyond that, that's where they're at. They're not over there. They're over here, right here. But beyond that, I'd have to say, thank you for the support and sharing that with us. I was actually, for some reason, my mind was stuck on ground forces in Europe, which we don't have any technically that are based permanently out of Lithuania, but thank you for sharing that, because I actually did not know that we had a small air element in Lithuania that has been escorting any Russian intrusions around the area. I thank you for the support and sharing that with us. And something interesting, folks, is that there's actually a decent amount of air bases inside of Kaliningrad, if y'all did not know. Kind of a shocker, right? Because it's like pretty much a military fortress for the Russians in the middle of NATO at this point. But they actually have an air base right here outside of Kaliningrad, which is actively used, from what I understand, by some elements of the Russian Air Force, which you can see right there. We also know of another air base, and I'm trying to make sure that we find it. because there's another one further out here. Oh, here it is, right here. This is another abandoned Russian airbase, but it is believed that it could be brought up to operational status or be used in active war. And then there is another one. There's another one that is active, and I'm trying to find it really quickly. Like, it's actually kept up in somewhat decent condition. And where is it? Where is it? I'm trying to find this for all y'all. Doesn't seem that I can find this. Huh. Well, you know, this airfield, it eludes me. Where in the world is it? Okay, I'm giving up. I'm gonna have to find that one later. But beyond that, this airfield is a very important one for us to take. This naval base and this passage here is a very important thing for us to take. And also, generally, these fields outside of Kaliningrad are very important to take. So these are really the big priorities. That airfield, this passage, and largely all of the surrounding countryside fields, which should be easy for us to sweep through, because it's not an urban area. Urban areas are difficult to fight through, but open fields such as these should generally be easy to fight through, at least in a conventional sense, pre-Ukraine war. So, I hope that answers that well, at least with that side of things, because that airbase inside of Lithuania made me start thinking about the air bases inside of Kaliningrad, and I was like, let me show them to all of y'all, and I'm forgetting where the active one was. But with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A big thanks to you once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running, S. Pedro. I thank you for sharing that with us. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so our next one goes to Shauna, who puts in a $10 donation, and thank you very much, Shauna, as well for that support. And they said, America.
America, baby. And I got to thank you for the support, Shauna, and helping this channel to keep rolling, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to say America. We wouldn't be able to say long live the Republic. And so a massive thanks to you so much once again for support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible and keep it running. And so a huge thanks to you so much once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Luke UK, who puts in a 10. And Luke said, hello, everyone, and hello, LOC. And my question is, what is the special relationship between the US and the UK, and when did it start? And thank you very much.
And thank you for the support, Luke UK. And the special relationship between the United States and Britain happened not that long after American independence. It was a little after the War of 1812. I will admit there was a little bit of a rougher time in our relationships between the two countries, but we ended up largely getting a special relationship with Britain after the War of 1812. Why? Because of cotton. Everyone loved cotton. Cotton was a huge product of the United States. As a matter of fact, we were the largest producers of it at the time. That's why Alabama was actually known back in the day as King Cotton. That was a big thing that we produced here in the South. But nevertheless, Britain and France absolutely loved cotton. And this was actually a bit of a major shift, at least in terms of trade, that happened back in the day. Back before the founding of the United States of America as an independent country, the larger part of global trade existed inside of the East Indies, which is India and other places like these. This is actually where the Dutch VOC and the British East India Company ended up getting a lot of their wealth, power, and prominence economically back then because of the spice trade. And as we all know, the spice must flow. And the spice did. And it made people tons of money back then. But the thing is that spices started to get flooded in the European markets because these companies did so damn good at bringing it back. So tea, literally any kind of spice, cinnamon, so on, most of it became relatively inexpensive and cheap by the latter part of the 1700s. It just wasn't bringing in the money that it used to because it was too common. So the supply was high, the demand was decent, but for that reason, the prices plummeted. So a lot of people were looking to get into a new kind of a business that would end up bringing in more money. And something that brought in money was the soft, wonderful feel of cotton. If y'all do not know, back in the day in Europe, all clothes were made of wool. That was pretty much the only available sort of an item that could be produced into any sort of clothing, textiles, such things. And for that reason, wool was incredibly common. But once cotton was introduced, everyone was like, damn, this stuff is soft. Like, it's so much more comfortable to wear than wool. We want cotton. So a huge demand came into the United States for cotton, and that's what generally grew the South's economy during that time. But because of that, After the War of 1812 was over, and because Britain entered the Industrial Revolution and producing clothes inside of Britain, especially cotton clothes, became a really big industry, Britain grew a massive trade relationship with the United States of America, specifically over the cotton trade. And so cotton literally flowed into Britain and would be transformed into clothes at the major textile mills at cities like Liverpool, Manchester, and also London. But generally Liverpool and Manchester, which were really the garment industry of the United Kingdom for the longest period of time. But beyond that, that's really where the special relationship came from, was that really strong economic connection. And so that's basically the best explanation I could give. It's also why France was a really big ally of the United States throughout most of history, and we also were as well, because even through all of the political tumult that happened in France due to the French Revolution, the rise of Napoleon, the fall of Napoleon, the rise and return of the Bourbons, the end of the Bourbons, and then the creation of the French Republics, even still, France had an incessant demand for cotton. And so for that reason, France kept good relations with the United States of America. This is also a little bit of an interesting side fact for all of y'all to know, is that Britain and France almost stopped being friends with the United States, and this is also to show y'all why this is my major explanation. Britain and France almost stopped being friends of America's because of the Civil War. Because when the Civil War happened and the Union and the Confederacy came out largely of the secessions of 1860, Britain and France actually went, dang, we really like the United States, but we love that sweet field of cotton. And so they almost ended up actually allying officially with the Confederacy during the war, and there actually was, for a couple of short years, an embassy of the Confederate States of America in London. It actually existed for a short while, and Britain would also sell warships to the Confederacy to try and help them out a little bit, but they didn't want to sour the relationship too much with the official United States of America, and once the war ended, all of the ambitions of trying to support the Confederates completely collapsed, and then they went back to formalized full-on friendly relations with the United States of America to keep trying to get access to the cotton. So that's basically the best way that I can explain it. But remember, folks, everything after the 1600s, most relationships in the world have something to do with trade and resources of some kind. And it's a little bit interesting. You know, Matthew, something interesting I was learning about the other day. It's something that's incredibly interesting. Do you know where capitalism came from? Like the idea of stocks, shareholders, all that sort of a thing.
I heard that that bald eagle delivered the idea when it was flying through the sky and said "squow," and people said, "Yeah, let's go capitalism." Yeah.
Damn, that's so American. Man. Actually, you're wrong. I'm just kidding. I'm just playing with you, by the way. But do you really know where it came from?
Honestly, I really don't right off the bat. I kind of feel shameful not knowing that, as I should, because I'm a political science major, but I don't remember off the top of my head.
It came from the Dutch. Can you believe it? The Dutch are the inventors of capitalism.
Oh man, I was about to say it came from the Romans, but that's democracy. That's not capitalism.
So, I'm going to tell you something really interesting, Matthew. Did you know at a time there was a Dutch company that was worth $8 trillion?
When?
From 1600 to 1799.
That sounds like one of those like generational wealth gigs or something.
It kind of is, but it's actually crazy because this company is literally the inventor of the modern corporation structure with shareholders, stocks, all those sorts of things. It is the Dutch VOC, which is the Dutch East India Company, pretty much. It ended up becoming the largest and wealthiest company in human history. It was so valuable at its time that it was worth as much as modern day Amazon, Google, pretty much all of the major companies, like the 8 largest companies in the United States right now, and still had room to buy and own Walmart and a whole bunch of other of the major companies as a part of its actual value. It was huge because back in the day, the Dutch were trying to figure out right after they became an independent country, like literally right after, they were like, dang, how in the world do we beat the French and the British at sea in trade, or the Spanish and the Portuguese? And they were like, we know, we'll just make ourselves a giant company. And they're like, oh, dang, how do we do that? Because the Dutch government didn't want to put all the money in, like the Spanish, Portuguese, and British governments had into their major navies and trading companies. So the Dutch came up with this really cool idea. They're like, I know, we're going to like scam the public or something maybe. We're going to sit there and make them buy shares. Like this concept literally didn't exist. They came up with it at the time. They're going to buy these things called shares of the company, which raises funds for our venture. And if it's profitable, they'll get a portion of their shares, like the percentage of the profits that they have in shares, back as profits if they want to, do that. So they want to sell the shares back to us or cash in pretty much. And so they're like, okay, that's kind of cool. So they started to trade. Well, they didn't really trade them at first. They bought them. Like people just started to buy them. And they're like, okay, cool. Like they were like, this is going kind of well. And then some guy ended up running into a little bit of a financial snag. And he was like, damn, my reputation is going to be ruined if I cannot pay for these shares that I bought up front. And I'm pretty much paying on a payment plan. I'd be damned, I got to get rid of them. So he went in front of the docks at Amsterdam and he sold them for a little bit more than he made them, a little bit more than he bought them for. And thus, the first public stock trade was conducted by that particular guy in history. And his name is actually out there. I forgot his specific name. But then once he did that,
Satoshi Nakamoto?
No, no, it wasn't him. But once he did that, other people were like, oh, dang, like, I don't have to hold on to these forever. Like, I could just sell them to other people for more than I got them for. So people started to do that a lot. And so then the Dutch built the trading hall. And let me see if it still exists. Let's see. Amsterdam Stock Exchange building. Let me go see if I can find that. Let me see if I can show you all an image of that. So this was the first stock exchange building ever built in the world right here.
That's the first one. Honestly, the stock exchanges are always baller looking. Like that's one thing they always build right is a stock exchange.
Yeah, so this was just a building. It had no purpose rather than people gathering around and trading their actual paper stocks with each other. And this was the first publicly traded stock anywhere in the world. But the Dutch East India Company was able to raise a lot of money through this stock trading, which they came up with. And everyone else in the world, in Britain and elsewhere, were like, wow, this is genius. And then this started to become a common thing. They ended up creating the first board of directors. They ended up creating pretty much, quite literally, the full corporate structure that you see in most companies today was created by the Dutch East India Company first. They traveled around the world, of course, doing very questionable stuff because there was no laws at all at the time for what you could do out there. So they did all kinds of stuff, enslavements, genocides, spice trading, killing people, going to war. They actually had the right to go to war on their own. The Dutch government gave them the ability to do that. So if you pissed them off, the Dutch East India Company, as its own corporate entity, could go to war with you, and you weren't at war with the Dutch, you were at war with the Dutch East India Company, which is a little bit confusing. But that was actually how corporate structures worked back then, because that's also what the British East India Company could do too. But they grew to a massive size of about $7.9 trillion at their peak. But by the time that the U.S. broke away, this is actually a part of the cotton story to tell you all about, the Dutch East India Company and the British East India Companies, or the VOC and the British East India Company, did so good at importing spices into Europe that they became inexpensive and cheap. So then everyone went, dang, I'm going to sell my stocks because we're not really bringing in that much money and these stocks aren't really raising in value. I'm going to sell my stocks in these companies. I'm going to put my stocks in the companies that are trading with the United States. And so because of that, the stock value of VOC plummeted. And then eventually, the French also invaded the Netherlands as well about that time in 1799. So the supply lines were completely cut off, pretty much severed. And then after that, the Dutch puppet government that was created by the French through Napoleon then subsidized and nationalized the remainder of the VOC that existed because it went into receivership and bankruptcy. But through the wealth of the VOC, it allowed the people of the Netherlands, elsewhere in Britain as well, because anyone could buy their stocks, to be able to invest in the shipping companies that would end up doing business with the United States for American cotton, dyes, and so on. And that would actually end up becoming the economic rise, pretty much the economic rocket ship that the United States already was before the beginning of the Civil War.
Interesting. I didn't know any of that. It's very fascinating.
Yeah, trade history is actually a very interesting thing. If y'all ever want to know where real money comes from, it is always through trade. Trade is the real way that people make money in the world. So if you ever want to know a lot about the rise and fall of countries, especially throughout the Middle Ages and the modern age, it pretty much all comes down to trade of some extent. But with that, I hope that has addressed it well. I hope that was an interesting rabbit hole for all of y'all about the Dutch East India Company, the rise of the United States, the special relation, and where it came from with Britain and also France pretty much simultaneously. But a big thanks to you once again for the support. I hope that addressed your question incredibly well, Luke UK, and also was a very interesting history on trade. But with that, I hope that does address it the best I can. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one here goes to Just a Plumber, who puts in a $10 donation. And thank you very much, good sir, Just a Plumber, for that support.
Hey!
And they said, I love the Leaf Spring Eagle, and I would love to know the LSA origin story, and why are we the LSA?
Why are we the LSA? Don't question it. I'm just kidding, Just a Plumber. Great question. Way back in the day, there was a Panzer S-1 air defense system that was burning out of Chernihiv. And I looked at it and I saw leaf springs on it. And while I can recount to you the whole history of the VOC and the rise of American trade and all that stuff in great detail, I did not know the leaf spring suspension was a modern thing, or it was still a modern thing. I thought it was obsolete. So I called it obsolete, and everyone who was in the live chat that day grilled me for it, and then they grilled me the next day. And so we had a choice. We could either try and put this joke down and end up looking like we have hurt egos, which generally it was pretty funny by that point how badly people were just going at me for it, or we could lean into the joke and own it and, you know, make it into a funny thing. So we leaned into it and turned it into a funny joke. And it turned out really well. People loved it, and people thought it was pretty funny. So after that, because people were so obsessed with that joke and talking about it, we were like, dang, this is like a group of people who are really like into leaf springs. And so then someone in the chat, I forgot who it was, but they actually said, dang, this is like a leaf spring army, kind of working on like the Brofist army idea of PewDiePie or other groups. And so we were like, hey, that's like actually a pretty good idea. We are the leaf spring army. And so then that's where the community got its name. That's why the community is the LSA. And while the name's a joke, I tried to make it a little bit more into a serious thing, so that way the LSA had a bit of an identity to itself. So I started to try and say, you know, people in the LSA, you know, they don't align with political biases. They look more for reason. You know, we are in support of American and Western interest. And then we came up with a flag, and we came up with an anthem, and we came up with a whole bunch of stuff to move the LSA more from just being a joke into something that is more of an ideology or an ideological group, and hopefully really trying to spurn the betterment of the country, at least through its beliefs. That's kind of what I was shooting for in the modern day. After about a year after the LSA existed, that's what we were really shooting for. But the Eagle is actually an interesting story in itself. And also, I know that a lot of people love the LSA Eagle. The LSA Eagle is probably the coolest piece of channel imagery, in my opinion, that's come out. And let me go get it really quickly, because I actually have it in Canva, the show on screen. So let me go and grab that really quickly, because it looks great. And I've got to give like the whole story about where it came from, because it's a really cool story in itself. And it's kind of like the Betsy Raw story of the channel. So let's see here. I want to go find the individual eagle. Also, this is an idea, folks, that I had at a time, and it is kind of cool, actually. I'll show this to you all while I'm... Well, hang on. I'll actually just go find the LSA flag, because eventually it's got to be here. Dang, the LSA flag is old. It's at least 2 years old at this point, I think. So let me keep scrolling. Ah, yes, here it is. This is the original LSA flag. So this is an idea that I actually had for an American LSA flag design that I made in Canva, and I never showed to anyone. I didn't even show this to Matthew, but I'll show it to y'all because I thought it looked really cool. And I just looked at it, I was like, oh, dang, that actually was pretty cool. But this was an American LSA flag design that I had for like the American division of the LSA, if you wanted to call it that. So moving on to the real LSA flag, this thing is pretty cool. The color is a little bit more muted in the blue, but it's a really cool thing because we were trying to design a flag for so many years before this flag came into being. It was like a year and a half or 2 years before this flag came into existence for the LSA. So the LSA had no flag as a group for a long time, but we started a flag competition, and we were like, whoever makes the best flag, their flag is going to be the flag of the LSA. So the people went to work. We had at least, I think it was like, what was it, Matthew? Like 60 or 70 submissions of different flag designs, I think.
It was a lot. I think it was definitely somewhere in that range, yeah.
Yeah, it was a load of them. We had like 60 or 70 of them. And so One viewer, who is the Betsy Ross of the LSA pretty much, called Torosaur, came up with this design. And once we saw it, we were like, this is the design for the LSA flag. This is it. And so Torosaur actually got the very first edition flag that we ever made. We don't even have flag number 1. Flag number 1 is owned by Torosaur. Torosaur designed the flag. He allowed us to actually get the rights to the flag, so that way it's owned by the channel, and we have the rights to publish it, copy it, and everything. But because he's the designer of it and has the complete credit for being the Betsy Ross of this channel, we actually made the first flag, personally hand-signed it, and then sent it off to him. We have, I think, a copy number 2 and number 3 personally owned by us. Number 2 is owned by me, and number 3 is owned by Matthew. And then there's about, roughly, I think there's like 550 other LSA flags out there that were made in a limited edition run that got sent out to everyone. But that is pretty much the story of the flag for the large part. And since then, it's taken on a life of its own. People love this design and think it looks just damn amazing. Like, it looks amazing. I mean, it looks incredible, especially when you make the background a darker blue like this. Like, honestly, I think the darker blues, like navy blue, with the LSA Eagle, really make it pop and make it look really clean. And we might actually change that on future editions of the LSA flag, because the faded blue is good, but the darker blue seen here, that is really, really good looking to me. And maybe we'll also make a limited print, at least at some point, of an LSA America flag like this, because honestly, this actually looks pretty clean. Like, I looked at it, I was like, it doesn't look too bad. But let me know what y'all think. Would y'all like an eventual limited edition LSA America version of the flag, or would y'all like us to just keep reprints of the traditional LSA flag? Because either way, I'm perfectly fine with it, but I think it would be kind of cool to have an LSA America flag. And I was also trying to figure out, because I was just playing around one night with this, I was like, what if we could do an LSA UK flag, where we put the LSA Eagle in the middle of the Union Jack, and we also try and figure that out with other countries, where we try and put the LSA Eagle on other flags. I thought that might be a neat idea. But I see, let's see, some people are saying both. If we would eventually do both, honestly, but if a lot of people really wanted us to do an LSA America flag, we could do an LSA America flag. So with that, I hope that has addressed that well. I hope that also tells you all the epic story of the LSA and the creation of the LSA flag, which is called the white and gold, because the eagle is white and gold. Also, by the way, another fun fact for y'all is that the LSA Eagle actually wasn't going to be white and gold. It was just going to be solid white, because that was the first design that Torosaur sent. And then Torosaur sent right after that one that was white and gold. And he was like, I have a white and gold LSA Eagle. And Matthew and me both saw it, and we went, oh man, this goes hard. And so it became white and gold permanently. And no white prints of the flag where it's just a solid white eagle went out. It's white and gold every single time. So the flag is technically called the white and gold. So with that, I hope that does address that the best I can, at least with the whole story. And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, we are on to the next one.
All right, so moving on to our next super chat. This one goes to LC39A, who's a longtime channel legend, and he's thrown in another $100 support tonight. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. Last night, he went on a supporting rampage last night, and we do sincerely appreciate that. And tonight, he is supporting crazily again, and we appreciate that. Because, of course, that's the support that keeps this channel running, and just like viewers like you, make the channel available to literally everybody that wants to watch it every single night. So thank you very much, good sir. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta thank you for the unbelievable support in helping this channel to keep on running, LC39A from the great Dominion of Canada. I got to thank you incredibly for the support and helping this channel to keep running, because if it was not for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel possible. We wouldn't be able to eat. Matthew, are you hungry?
Maybe. I'm not really sure. I'll be honest with you, man. Like, my brain is like fried. Like, I've been trying to like hide it the whole night, but today was a long day. I did like a million major tasks today. My brain is fried. I'm fried like the Russians stay on a regular basis in their military at this point.
Also, you forgot to mention that literally everything went wrong today at every turn. Like, everything.
I'll tell you what,
Like,
the ice egg was just sending the text to the CPA in the middle of the night and trying to reverse it right here on the air. I was like, oh my God. I'm like, how many more things is going to go stupid today? Honestly, I've been productive, effective, and also stupid today all at the same time. It's been amazing.
Should we tell the folks how everything went wrong today? Like, literally everything?
I don't know if I'm going to everything, to be honest, but I don't want to be reminded of it. And also, some of it's too personal.
Well, I want to tell you all this story though, because this is one I know that isn't going to be too personal, and it was hilarious because this was something I had to deal with today. But for a long time, it was like an hour and a half. So everything had been going wrong up till this point today. Like everything was like we had a lot to do today before the show, including making a video, but we had one simple task that we had to do in all of this, and all of this was already going wrong, and it was to get food. And so Matthew said, "Oh, look, we can make this a lot easier. I can just order this online." And I said, "Yeah." I was like, "Just order it online." So he ordered it online, and then we went and started driving. And when we were driving to go get it, we got to the place. It wasn't that far from us. I go in and I'm like, "Hey, I'm here to pick up a little online order." And they're like, "We didn't get one." And I was like, "What do you mean?" And they're like, "We just didn't get one." Where did you order it at? Was it at here or was it at another location? So then I went out to Matthew at the car and I was like, "Did you get it at another location?" He was like, "I got it at this location." I walked back in. I was like, "He said he got it from here." They were like, "Yeah, that's a different location. Sorry." And it was across town. And I was like, "Damn." I was like, "Okay, we'll see you around then. Thanks for letting us know." And so I got back in the car and I was like, "Okay, we got to go get this thing from this other place." And so we end up driving maybe a half a mile, and then someone calls. And it's someone that we were expecting, but we were supposed to get a full hour's notice before they showed up, and they called us and gave us like a 15-minute notice. So then Matthew was like, "Damn it, everything's going wrong." He's like, "I gotta go home and deal with this guy. Can you go get the food on your own?" Because we were planning on going together. And I was like, "Yeah, sure, I can get it on my own." So we went back, he got out, I got in my car, when driving. As soon as I get on the road, you wouldn't believe it. I forgot to tell you this, Matthew. Car crash. Believe it or not. Of course it has to happen.
You wrecked your car?
No, not me. It was another car crash. So car crash happens down the road. Firefighters flying down the way. Got to pull over. No one's pulling over. So, they're like weaving through the traffic and everything. So anyways, get down this shithole of a road that takes like 30 minutes to get like 8 miles. If you're from Birmingham, you know what road I'm talking about. And I get to the place. I go in, "Hey, I'm here to pick up an order for Andrew," which is me. They give me the order. One of them's a sandwich. They're both supposed to be sandwiches. One of them's a sandwich. One of them is everything that's supposed to be in the sandwich without the sandwich. It's just in like a plate. And I was like, "What is this?" I was like, "What the hell is this?" So I didn't say anything about it. I was like, "You know what? I'm not going to say anything. Everything's going wrong already today. I'll just go back to the other place and I'll get the sandwich from there." So get in the car, drive back, go get the other sandwich. By the way, folks, it was a 40-minute trip back to the other place to get a sandwich. Got the sandwich, then talked to them, and then they were like, "Oh yeah, like if you order the sandwich without bread, you don't get bread. It's not a sandwich." I was like, "Oh, okay." So I went back home, finally got home. This is an hour and 10 minutes after this whole journey started, just to get us 2 sandwiches. Get back home, get out the food, and I'm like, "Weirdly enough, Matthew, they didn't make this one with bread." And he was like, "I ordered bread." And I was like, "Are you sure?" He pulled it up. He ordered it without bread. So I got a sandwich with no bread. This whole adventure.
But here's the part you're missing though. In the meantime, I'm on the phone this morning trying to line up a CPA for some back end stuff this morning. So the first CPA is an idiot that I was on the phone with. And they literally had scheduled us for a Zoom meeting so that way I could speak to them about some of the things. And they didn't send me a link to the Zoom meeting. So I then look and I'm like, okay, they didn't even assign a CPA to us. They assigned a tax associate. I'm like, that's not who I was looking for. So I had to call and basically tell them, "Y'all didn't do what you said you were going to do. So cancel the appointment. I'm moving on with somebody else." So then after that whole ordeal is over, I get on and go and contact a new CPA. So then later on, thank God, they call like literally like 30 minutes afterward. I'm like, "Oh, thank God. Like I have a good CPA on my hands here. I finally found one." So they call in the midst of all this business about the stuff and the bread not being on the sandwich and stuff like that. And then knock on the door, the stove repairman shows up to fix the stove in the middle of me on the phone with the CPA while Andrew's out trying to go get the sandwich with no bread. So while all that stuff's going on, I'm telling the CPA, "I apologize so much. Can you please just hold for 10 seconds so I can let this man in the door who's going to fix the stove?" And thankfully the guy was understanding. He was like, "Yeah, sure. Like, you go right ahead." I was like, "Thank you. I'm sorry for this." So I let the stove guy in and I'm like frantic with the stove dude. Like, "Yeah, like this is a handle right here. It's just a handle right here." He's like, "Oh yeah, I got you. Like, no problem." So he's like a champ, comes in and fixes it without me having to tell him very much. So then I get back on the phone to CPA. I'm sitting there doing all this. So then he fixes the stove and got the phone with the CPA. It's like pure chaos and like a freaking mess. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the stove being fixed. He fixed the stove, by the way. That's like done with finally. And I got the CPA lined up. But then I've been doing onboarding the entire day for that. So that's been tying me up. And also trying to deal with some other back end stuff for the business, answering the emails and all stuff like that. So today's been chaos. Like it has been absolute chaos. And then the enforcer had a sandwich with no bread.
Yeah,
so trying to gum on some like ham and stuff that's just in a box.
It's literally chopped cheese, like in a plate. Like it's not even a sandwich. But like it was like just like craziness today. Like that was just adding on to everything else. I didn't want to tell you all the extra details because maybe it's like I don't know if I want to tell them. So I was like I'm just gonna tell you all the sandwich story because I know that one's got nothing too sensitive in it. But then everything started going wrong after the sandwich. Everything was going wrong today. And it does sound like a Monday, Crispy, but it's a Tuesday. It's not supposed to be happening today. None of this is supposed to be happening today. Like, if a shitstorm happened, like, we were busy yesterday, Matthew, if you remember, like, we were going, well, I was going, at least from what I remember, and you were as well, from, like, 11 in the morning, which is when we usually get up, to, like, 12 o'clock at night. And then we went, so it's not even an off day at that point. We're working on stuff all day, chores, errands, all that stuff, life. And then today, everything goes wrong. And it's like, if everything was to go wrong, why not Monday? Because we had the off day to deal with it. We also have to run a show today.
Well, you forgot one other thing as well. Then after all that was over with, and I sat down to finally eat my sandwich. I was like, oh, thank God I can eat my sandwich. Sitting there trying to put some barbecue sauce on it. Like I can finally like chill out after all this chaos all day long. Then I get on YouTube and check my video. And it turns out my video barely made any revenue. And I was like, what the hell? Like it didn't make any money. I'm like, that's weird. Like what the hell's up with that? So I go on there and look, and there's some type of what I believe to be a glitch in their system. Is it literally made 10 times less than what the videos usually make. So then I go and try to tag YouTube on Twitter, and I get a generic response. Then I go to their live chat support to try to like get the team on board to try to figure out what's going on. They tell me there's nothing wrong at all. So I went back and checked just a minute ago, and it is not showing the ad revenue on the video whatsoever.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it's not showing it. I checked it on the mobile app, and it's not showing it. It just shows YouTube Premium, and it shows the super things that people generously threw in on the video yesterday. So I was like, what the? Like, I literally just got done trying to deal with that. So after all that mess, I was trying to fight with that, and I still don't have that resolved right now at the moment. I got to try to get back on that tomorrow, and I'm sure more people will probably complain about it, and they'll probably fix it. But oh man, I tell you what, I did see another YouTuber saying he had a problem with it though. He responded to my Twitter message and said I also have the same problem. So I'm just saying, a little support would be nice. But what can you say? Hey, I guess people aren't perfect.
And also, like speaking of everything going wrong, so I come back without the sandwich with no bread, and I was like, okay, good. We've got the sandwiches. The sandwich with no bread's here. We can eat that later. Just like chopped cheese, pretty much. But it's fine. Like it's no big deal. So then Matthew's telling me about everything that happened while I was gone. I was like, oh, okay, cool. I was like, oh, by the way, did you tell the CPA this thing? And like it was a very important thing. And then Matthew went from smiling to not, I just totally forgot that, man. Like, there was a lot going on. And so he immediately stopped. He doesn't even eat. He just goes back over there and starts trying to, like, communicate with this guy about that. And I was like, damn. I was like everything that could have gone wrong went wrong. Like, all day, every day for both of us. It was just an endless string. Like, something that was easy. And it wasn't even us making it, like, wrong. It was just, like, something would happen. Like, the whole thing of the missing bread thing, just to explain what happened, Matthew accidentally skipped over the part that asks about bread, so it just defaults to no bread, because he thought it, like, defaulted to, like, normal white bread, like a hoagie, and apparently it defaults to no bread, so he skipped over and didn't select, like, he didn't left-click that button, so it defaulted to no bread. That's why he got no bread. So I honestly thought that if you, like, skipped over that, it just gave you, like, white bread by default, because it's a sandwich, but apparently it gives you no bread. So it's like that commercial, Matthew, from, like, the memes, where they're like, hey, Jimmy, give me a ham and cheese with nothing. Like, nothing? Bro, it's that one. It's that one.
I'll tell you what, nothing. But then after all that, though, I will say this. Like, the highlight of the day has been getting on the stream. But sadly, like, I started off strong because I had coffee in my system. But about at the 11:30 mark or so, my coffee is worn off. And now I'm here right now at this point where my brain is, like, barely firing like a neuron a second or something. It's slowed down dramatically. So I'm like, oh, man, I've lost my coffee fake energy. And I can't drink coffee now or I'll stay up until, like, 5 o'clock in the morning. So that's where Enforcer Matt said. Enforcer Matt has been put through the ringer today. He's been put through Bizarro World today to a certain extent. But thankfully, though, I did get some productive things accomplished, and we got a good CPA that's very friendly, knows what he's talking about and doing. So thankful as hell for that. But I tell you, it's been a hell of a day. It's been a hell of a day.
It's been a crazy day, but that's a little bit of why Matthew is a little tired and a little sleepy. But nevertheless, also I just drank a load of coffee, so I do that every night. So no matter what, I power through. I power through, folks. I power through, and also hardly like if we had to say like proportionally what went wrong. The third of my stuff went wrong. 2/3 of everything that went wrong today was Matthew's. So more so on him than me. So I got to weather it a little bit better, and also I drink an insane amount of coffee, like hundreds of milligrams every night, so I power through anyways. But anyways, with that, we are on to the next one.
Also, someone said, you got to smoke, bro. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do anything like that when it comes to dealing with problems like this. I just... wait, what?
We raw dog life. Isn't that what they say? Like what the kids say?
Yeah, I don't know. Like, this is the first time I'm hearing this, but anyways, I'll just go into it just straight up and take it head on. Honestly, that's the way I do it. But moving on to our next one here. This one goes to Jody Mandelias, who puts in a $20 donation, and thank you very much, Jody, for that $20 support. And I do not see a comment to address, but thank you very much, Jody, for of course always supporting the channel as well and being a longtime channel legend. And Enforcer, what say you?
And I gotta say, a big thanks to the support of Jody Mandelias. You're helping this channel to keep running, so we can make sure to keep this thing growing, even if everything goes wrong every day. So a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And I see a lot of people asking about that phrase. I don't know where it comes from, folks. I just know that it's said. I've seen it a lot, so I'm just working with it here. Because a lot of people say that these days in my generation, and I'm always like, I don't know what that means. But, you know, I'm going to go with it. So, you know, I went with it, and that's what I do. Am I going to apologize? No. And so that does address it the best I can. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one. But a big thanks to you once again.
All right, so going on to our next super chat. This one goes to Michael Mervahill, who puts in a 10. And thank you very much, Michael, as well. He said, blockade Russia.
World War III. But beyond that, thank you for the support. Honestly, I think that we can blockade them with sanctions. But if we have to, they're the Russians. We have to blockade them, and we will. And so with that, a big thanks to you so much for the support. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Wonton Quadruple 8, who puts in a 10. He said, Mother Nature has joined the war on Ukraine's side, and love Ukraine, and I've been busy at work, so I've only been able to listen into the stream with less chatting, but still going strong in LOSA.
And I gotta thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And I gotta say, Mother Nature did kind of on the Ukraine side today. It said, hey, you got a submarine pin, and just like overran it a little, maybe a little damage at Vilkovo, maybe. But beyond that, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep going strong ourselves, Wonton Quadruple 8. And so a huge thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one. I see that my euphemism has gotten a lot of people talking. I guess this is the way to bump up chat encouragement at the chat engagement at the end of the stream, is saying an old phrase from the Generation Z. But beyond that, I see a lot of people saying what it means. Yes, sir, guy, you are correct. You are correct. That's what it means in my generation. Apparently, it means something else for everyone else. A little bit wild with that. But anyways, with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
And our next one goes to Wind and Raven Steve Patterson, who does not leave a comment. But thank you very much, Steve, for that support, and we do appreciate that very, very much. And we also have a 10 from Canadian War Crime, who said, thanks for your hard work, guys.
Oh, thank you, Canadian War Crime. We thank you for the support and helping this channel to keep running. Interesting name, by the way. Where did you happen to get that? World War I? But still, a big thanks once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one. But before we do, Gigi Rochelle said, is this a replay? No, it's not. Why would you think that? We're doing this live. We're doing it live. Why do people always ask that? Like, does it sound like we're AI? Does it sound like we're fake? We're not fake. We're real. We're not AI. We're not fake people. We're not a replay. We're real. We're here right now. Matthew's tired. I'm zooted on caffeine. It's a normal night for the large part. So there's your answer. It's live. But anyways, with that, we're on to the next one.
All right, so our next one here goes to Dupper Bob, who puts in a 10. And Dupper says, Slav Ukraine.
And Ram Slava. And a big thanks to you for the support, Dupper Bob. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Sherry Taylor, who puts in 10, who said, say hi to Mr. Anders in Newport Richey, Florida. And we are watching from here and always enjoy the show.
Oh, and hello to Mr. Anders, and hello to you, Sherry Taylor. And thank you to both of y'all for the support and enjoying the show. We try our best here. I'm glad to know that y'all enjoy it. All the way down there from the wonderful lands of Newport Richey in Florida. So a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that incredibly well. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the next one.
And this one goes to Randy Smith, who puts in a 10. And Randy said, I can't believe that Congress isn't trying to produce more weapons and Navy assets because it would be great for our economy.
Exactly. It'd be great for the economy. Think about it. Newport News, endless business. Ingalls Shipyard, endless business. All the shipyards in America, endless business. There would be nothing wrong with it. Why in the world do they not want to do it? It would create a lot of jobs. It would create a lot of them, and well-paying ones. And yet it doesn't happen. You know what? The Congress needs to get on top of that. I'm going to call up my representative and ask them, why aren't they starting the war machine? And so with that, a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that has addressed that well. Randy Smith, big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to TNP, who puts in a 10. And they said, let's see here. They said something here. I'm not sure what they said, though, but they said something about a Russian drone. I'm not sure what that means, but thank you very much, TNP, for that support, and we do appreciate that. And we also have a 7 from Seiko Active, who did not leave a comment, but thank you very much, good sir, for that support as well. And we had a 5 from Shannon Newman, who said LSA.
And thank you for the support to both of y'all, and a big thanks to you, Shannon Newman, for the LSA, because of course, the LSA will never die. So a big thanks to you once again. I hope that has addressed that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Mr. Hunky Dory, who puts in a 5. And they said 8.7 earthquake of coast of Russia. West coasters, watch out.
And I'd have to agree. I hope y'all watch out and stay safe out there on the West Coast, because that sounds rough. So a big thanks to y'all once again for the support, and stay safe out there, West Coasters. Please do. And so with that, we are on to the next one.
And our next one goes to Melissa Renee, who puts in a 5 and said, for a nice cup of coffee or tea.
Oh, coffee or tea. Matthew probably needs coffee. I also need coffee. We're coffee people. We're Costco guys. But beyond that, a big thanks to you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And our next one here, also, by the way, if you're curious, let's see. We're hearing right now from Russian officials that significant and strong aftershocks from this earthquake with magnitudes of up to 7.5, and the aftershocks are anticipated to persist for at least 1 month. You heard that right. Apparently, they're expecting aftershocks literally of up to 7 on the Richter scale to literally go on for a month. That's insane right there. I'm not sure if the Russian official has that accurate or not, because I'm not sure how well the seismologists or whatever they're called in Russia are well trained or not. But damn, son, that could be crazy right there. But also, we got another video of the earthquake actually in motion, by the way. It looks like in a place in eastern Russia. It looks like maybe in a house, if you want to take a look at this video real quick.
Oh, in a house. You have an earthquake entirely enclosed in your house at this time of day in this part of the country, entirely localized within your living room? Yes. And here's the clip. Dang. These people have got a lot of faith in Russian construction.
Like the house is haunted.
Ooh!
Haunted by the ghost of seismology past.
It's the Russian economy. Ooh!
El cameraman.
Man, the cameraman never dies. Never does. Never will. But that's crazy right there. You know, and we're getting more and more out of it. More clips. But we'll save those for tomorrow, because I'm sure that the short war summary tomorrow will include some of those for your entertaining viewership. But with that, it's time for us to move on into the next one.
All right, so moving on from that and on to our next one. And also, by the way, Hawaii is expected to get hit here very shortly. Apparently, it's pretty serious. It looks like Midway's reporting some pretty big receding of the water there. So it looks like it could be pretty bad in Hawaii. But moving on to our next super chat here. This one is going to go to none other than LSA Sergeant Figment once again, who puts into 5. He said, LSA, hit the like button. That's in order. Keep up the great work, and LSA all the way, and take a live chat question.
And thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep running. And I gotta say, we will make sure to get a live chat. So, what do we got, Matthew?
And this live chat question goes to Judy from the live chat, who said, what will the U.S. do when the time is up for Russia at the end of the 10 days?
Apparently, we're going to sanction them heavily and also start providing a large amount of support to the state of Ukraine, from what we know. So I hope that does answer that question well. A big thanks to you once again for the support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Jesus UCSB, who says, ha 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 ha, LSA.
Hey, and it's LSA Tanka from Vilsec, Germany here. And a big thanks to you for the support, Jesus UCSB, and helping this channel to keep on running. And so with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one is going to go to SD NSO Group Unit 46, who puts in a 5, and also Alex Johnson, who puts in a 5 once again, along with Plazov, who puts in a 4. And a huge shout out to all 3 of you for that support as well. We also have a 5 from Mr. House, who said, Dark Horse for World War III outside Poland. Is that what that is?
Possibly. Maybe. I couldn't tell you for sure, but that might be a likely possibility. And so a big thanks to you for the support. I hope that does address that well. We're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Kyle Padell, who puts in a 5. And he said he heard a bad joke in the chat right there. A bad joke about somebody's mom. I tell you, I saw that person right there. I'm not sure if they're in the chat anymore. I'm not really sure. But thank you very much, Kyle, for that support. And Enforcer, what say you?
I got to thank you for the support, Kyle, and helping this channel to keep on running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this thing possible. So a huge thanks to you once again. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 5 from Tyler Harris once again, who said, I'm leaving for Hawaii tomorrow, and what great timing, LOL.
And I got to thank you for the support, Tyler Harris. And I got to say, you're going to arrive there a little bit after the tsunami, actually. So lucky for you, it'll be over. But hopefully the folks on Hawaii stay safe. I hope so. But still, a big thanks to you once again. Hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And this one goes to Andrew Honeycutt, who puts in a 2. He said, the bread will be eaten on Tuesday with snow coffee.
And we love to eat the bread on Tuesday with our guns and snow coffee made of snow. But I thank you massively for the support, Andrew Honeycutt, and helping this channel to keep running. Because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to eat the bread with the birds on Tuesday and say that it's yummy. And so a big thanks to you once again, and we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Rusty, who puts in a 2. He said, make me MOD, and of course, Slav Ukraine.
Hey, thank you for the support. Maybe one day you can be the Rusty Cracker. Maybe. But a big thanks to you once again. And with that, we are on to the next one.
And this one goes to Derek Pruce, who puts in a 2. And Derek said, take a question from the chat, and y'all are great, and keep it up.
Hey, we will make sure to take one from the chat. And thank you for the kind words. So what do we got, Matthew? What do we got?
And this one from the chat is going to go to none other than O-Tubes, who said, I heard one of the mouthpieces of the Russian government said we're already in World War III, and did you hear that?
I personally didn't hear about that, but I'm sure one of them somewhere said that because they're nuts and they're stupid. So I would expect it. And so with that, I hope that does address that well. I think it wants to give us support. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Mr. Hunky Dory, who said, I'm happy I'm 51 and I won't be drafted first. Drone's bad.
I would agree, but me and Matthew are ripe drafting age, so we'll be the first into the fray. And so a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from Cody Fritz, and he said, I saw volcano Calbuco erupt in 2015. Check it out.
Let's see here, the Calbuco eruption. That happened in near to Chile. Where did it happen? Let's see, it was in southern Chile. But here it is. That's the volcano he was seeing right there. And what does the eruption look like? Oh, look, there's the plume right there from the eruption. Oh, look at that. Wow. They changed the user interface for everything. I don't like that. But look, there's the eruption plume. That's actually pretty crazy right there. I got to thank you for the support and sharing that with us, Cody Fritz. That's pretty neat, actually. And so a big thanks to you once again. Hope that does address that well. And with that, folks, we're on to the next one.
And we have a 2 from the Comfort Zone, who said, do you guys drink some Black Rifle coffee? And I do from time to time. It's just a little bit pricey. That's the only reason I don't drink it full time. I drink something a little bit cheaper than that, but it's good every once in a while, and it has pretty good amount of caffeine in it. But Enforcer, what say you?
Black Rifle coffee is at Colt gun level prices. It's very expensive stuff for the amount that you get, but it is good. It's decent, actually, and we drink it from time to time, but I'm more so of a nitro cold brew person, and I drink it in bulk, like Costco guys. We're Costco guys. So I hope that does answer your question well. I thank you once again for support and help this channel to keep on running. And with that, folks, it's time for us to move on into the second segment of this stream, where we get to talk to each and every one of y'all, at least in the live chats. And of course, I gotta say, due to time constraints, and also due to the fact that Matthew is tired and everything's been going wrong today, we want to make sure to limit this down a little bit. It's not overtime yet, technically, but we're going to be grabbing the Morse code decoders, 5 Laugh Chat questions, and then we're going to be rounding out this stream. And so with that, Matthew, what do we got?
And tonight for the Morse code decoding, we had Paul Schultz, Kevin J, Mason Miami, Joni Dog, Norm Pritchett, Arabelle Garbo, her royal fluffiness, and they said the Morse says Russia refusing the ultimatum is a clear sign of what we've been saying for years, and LLT LSA.
And ding! That is the sound of money. I'll get the 10 on the nail. Those are Morse code messages tonight. I got to congratulate everyone in the Least Brain Cinema Corps for continuing to get that correct time and time again, because y'all are always amazing at getting that 10 on the nail. It's really impressive. And honestly, we've gotten that right for years. We've said that they wouldn't want a piece, and that they don't want one. It doesn't take a rocket scientist. And so a big thanks to y'all once again for getting that Morse code message correct. And with that, it's time for us to move on to the 5th to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Flamehawk, who said, would thermite carried by a drone placed in the right location be enough to destroy a Russian locomotive?
Technically, it probably could, but you'd have to keep that thermite on something for long. So I would say possibly, but it's repairable most likely. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. And with that, we are on to the 4th to last question of the night.
And this one goes to AF Kaplan, who said, regarding the big earthquake that struck near Russia, were there any military assets nearby? And if yes, did they sustain damage?
There was a submarine pen nearby in the area of Vilkovo, but we don't know if it suffered any damage, and we haven't been able to get any preliminary reports out of that area, so we'd largely have to declare ignorance on that. So with that, we are on to the 3rd to last question of the night.
And we have one from Theta, who said, isn't Russia weakened enough that Poland could basically put them in their place on their own now?
Technically, yes. At least materially, that could possibly be the case. So I would say yes. For the large part, it's possible. And so I hope that does address it quite well, at least the best we can. And with that, we are on to the 2nd to last question of the night.
And this one goes to Plexus Gaming, who said, besides NATO, do the Balkan states have a common defensive pact or an agreement?
The Balkans do not, but the Baltics are all defended under NATO, and that's their common defense pact and agreement at the moment, and it supersedes any others that they had in the past. So I hope that is addressed it the best I can, at least from my understanding of the situation inside the Baltics. And with that, we are on to the final question of the night. So who is the lucky last person who threw in the lucky last question of the night?
Also, by the way, we have one more super chat here. It was a $20 super chat from You Dude Investments. And thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And also, sorry for missing that earlier. I think it might have come in while maybe I was distracted trying to reverse that text. So I think that's why I missed it. But thank you very much, good sir, for that support. And also, sorry for the delay. He said, 16-year Army vet. And also, thank you very much for your service. He said, I wrote a book and I'm trying to save my house after a nasty divorce. And any support is greatly appreciated. And they said the book is called The Blueprint on Amazon and purposely misspelled and by T. Palmer, and LSA, and love y'all.
And thank you so much for the support. And I hope that people do get your book. Thank you for your time in the service. That's an incredibly long time to be in the service. And I got to thank you massively for the support and enjoying this channel. And I hope that people do take a gander at your book and take a good reading of it. Because books are always a nice thing to read, at least in my opinion, no matter what type they are, really. So a big thanks to you once again. I hope that does address that well. And with that, we actually have one last super chat to cover before we get to the final question of the night.
All right. And also, by the way, I'm not sure what this person is talking about. Do you see this in the chat? Do you see that, by the way?
Which one?
Oh, I'll read it. But anyways, jumping into our next one here, this one goes to LC39A. And once again, thank you very much, good sir, for that 107 Canadian once again, and for the massive second support of the night. And we do appreciate that. He said, the earth is farting.
And I got to thank you for the massive support and helping this channel to keep on running LC39A, because if it wasn't for incredible folks like you, we wouldn't be able to keep this channel running. And I'd say, in a way, that it probably, most likely, is possibly farting. Maybe. I guess that's maybe the non-technical term for it, but still, I thank you so much for the support and helping this channel to keep on running, because if it wasn't for folks like you, we wouldn't be able to make this channel possible, and we wouldn't be able to keep it running. And so with that, also, Matthew, I finally see what you're talking about. And really quickly, let me see something. I don't know what they're talking about, because I believe we addressed...
I'm not sure either.
I believe we addressed that, and we thanked them for their support. So I don't really know what is going on with that. Also, I have to say that unfortunately, let's see. Also, we did address your super chat. Just to make that a little bit clear, I'm not going to name off the viewer there. Way early on, I mean, it was like I believe it was one of the first ones we addressed in the midway segment of the news. So we didn't refuse to answer it. We answered it, and also we thank you so much for the support. I mean, you know, we said that earlier. You didn't throw in a comment on it from what we saw. So we thank you for the support. You didn't throw in a comment. We're massively appreciative, though. You help it to keep running. And so, yeah, I mean, that's the best answer I can give you. I mean, maybe you missed us addressing this, or something like that. But if I had to take a good guess at when we addressed your super chat, it definitely was at the midway point of the news segment, because it was a larger one, and usually those are addressed in the midway segment. Also, we did take one from the chat as well. I believe we even added that in. So we did take one from the chat in your honor, and I could see it on the spreadsheet, and it's marked off with a red box, meaning that we physically addressed that. So I don't know why in the world you're thinking we didn't, and I would encourage that you rewind, because we certainly did at some point. And so with that, I hope that does address that the best I can. A little bit of a small misunderstanding, I believe, at the end of the stream. But with that, we've reached the end of tonight's stream. I've got to thank you all so much once again for enjoying the stream tonight. And if y'all have, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because we would love to have y'all join the LSA. Right now, we are at a whopping, let me make sure to check really quickly, 479,640 subscribers. And I got to thank you all massively once again for being here. And I also got to thank the 16,000 people who are here at the peak of the stream, and the 137,000 people who have watched. If it wasn't for each and every one of y'all, we wouldn't have a audience to be able to cover the news too. And so, a huge thanks to you all so much once again for enjoying the stream tonight, and we will see you all tomorrow at 10 p.m. Eastern Time to cover the next 24 hours of news from around the world. And so with that, good night, good luck, take care, stay safe, and Slava Ukraini, and long live the Lee Spring Army. The Lee Spring Army will never die.
And with that, folks, we will see you all tomorrow on the Short War video, if there is enough news to cover midday tomorrow, and I'll be doing that one. I believe tomorrow's my day, so you'll be hearing from me midday on that. And also, be sure to join us again tomorrow night at 10 p.m. Eastern for our next nightly War News stream, and we look forward to seeing every single one of you tomorrow. And a huge shout out to the 140,000 people that were here by the end of the stream tonight, and a huge shout out to everybody that smacked that like button as well. But with that, thank you all once again, and of course, Slava Ukraine, Heroes Slava, get some rest, and good night.
On the shore.